We're off and running on the Krug Show. Hope everybody's having a great day. Man, Denver is getting the doors blown off them at home in Game 2 against the T-Wolves. They're down 28, 78-50. Woo-wee! Minnesota won Game 1. These are both in Denver. Could the world champs be on the brink? On the brink. T-Wolves looking really, really good. Anthony
Edwards ain't no joke. I mean, I don't want to compare anyone to Mike, and I was a little too young to watch Mike in his prime, but just going back, watching his highlights I've seen, in the past and comparing him to what Anthony Edwards is doing right now. Like, Larry, am I crazy? Like, are you seeing some flashes where this dude's looking like MJ at moments?
On the offensive end. On the offensive end. I mean, he's not anything close to MJ on the defensive end. I would say Jordan was a little bigger, a little longer. This guy's more like 6'4". That, Jordan was probably more closer to 6'6". Jordan had length. This guy's not quite as long. But as far as offensively, being able to go anywhere he wants on the floor, the greatest athlete going to the hole in the league. I mean, where do you – I was asking my 14-year-old this. I'm like, we were watching the first half. Where do you put Anthony Edwards among the greatest players in the NBA today? Where's he on the list?
He keeps climbing. I think he's in the
10?
top 5 right now. I think
Top
he's hovering around the 5-ish.
Yeah. We are brought to you by Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in all of Northern California. Check them out. They're in Emeryville and Corte Madera, and they're open 7 days a week from 11 a.m. till 8 p.m. or until they run out. Pig and a Pickle. Absolutely the best barbecue you're going to find. I had a guy sent me a text today. He said, Krug, I'm here at Pig and a Pickle, and you're right. I love it. And I forwarded it to Damon and Mary, the owners of Pig and a Pickle. And they're like, we love it. We love it. We get people coming in every day, say they're watching the Krug Show. So thanks to Pig and a Pickle for being the title sponsor of the Krug Show. Thanks to Marin Auto Glass as well. They've been an outstanding sponsor for us this year. MarinAutoglass.com. Underdog Fantasy. Check the link in the description. Use the promo code Krug, K-R-U-E-G, and they will match you up to your first $100. And let's not forget Sharp Corner Sports Cards and Collectibles. I was talking to the owner of that company today, Anthony Catania, and you can get a hold of him at 831-521-5264. They're at 205 Cypress Avenue in Pacific Grove, California, along the Monterey Peninsula. He's like, Krug, I love sponsoring your show. We got people calling and coming in all the time saying they're found out about us through the Krug Show. So thanks to our sponsors, because let's be honest, obviously we make a lot of money off YouTube, but we also make money off of the sponsors, and the sponsors that we have been with us for quite a while. So we want to thank all of them for being proud sponsors of the Krug Show. Baller's in the house. Baller is one of my favorites. He's got a great channel as well. Bay Area Baller 18. If we take this off there, you can see it right there. What I want everybody to do tonight is not just give us a like and subscribe. If you hit like, that just helps the algorithm. More people find the stream. If you hit subscribe and then click that notification bell, every time we go live, you'll get a little ding on your phone, or if you silence it, a little reverb that says, hey, you know what? Krug's going live. And Baller puts out a ton of killer content, and he's an awesome guy. He's been with us for years. He's an OG on the Krug Show. So don't just hit like and subscribe over here. Please hit like and subscribe here, and then go over to Baller's channel, Bay Area Baller 18, and hit like and subscribe over there. Hold on a second. I'm going to turn on the fan. It's a little warm in here tonight.
Yeah, cool off. Hey, I appreciate that. Yeah,
you got to go with the fan. I get the full setup going today. I got the lights. I got the sign in the background. I've got the new studio. I've got the fan, which is, we start to use the fan. I got kind of a silent fan because last year's fan was like getting a little reverb on the mic. People could hear the wind.
Out in the creek, you need that fan. Out in the creek. I know that firsthand.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Especially from this point. Though it was freezing the other day, unbelievably. Saturday was like a rain fest. Our Little League game was rained out. But Baller's in the house, and we could talk about anything. We could talk Giants. We could talk Warriors. We could talk T-Wolves and Nuggets. But we want to talk with Baller about the Niners and the NFL draft. I believe the mini camp is going to be at the end of the week. I can't wait to get down there and put my eyes on some of these rookies and maybe talk to a few of them. and then report back to you guys and let you know what they're looking like. But I really loved the Niner draft because I think they not only hit in the draft, I think they hit after the draft. I love Mason Pline. I think I'm going to love Tanner Mordecai. I'm unbelievably impressed that they were able to sign Cody Schrader. Evan Anderson's a gigantic two-gapping defensive tackle. I think that was a nice pickup. So the Niners had some undrafted free agent additions that I think are, and maybe even some of these offensive linemen, Bryson Mays, Drake Nugent, could also be impactful. And we'll get into that as we go. But Baller, let's just start the draft discussion right here, and we'll start with just your opening salvo. How did you feel about the draft when it was going on before you heard anybody's evaluation? Because I know you did a lot of deep dives and your own film work and a lot of preparation. You get granular on the NFL, which is another reason to follow Baller, because like me, he gets granular on all this stuff. And for you guys who want like real insights, you can't really have real insights unless you kind of go deep on this stuff, and Baller does. So what'd you think, Baller? What'd you think of the draft? Just, without me leading you in any direction, what was your initial, breakdown of the thing?
Well, I thought the theme for the 49ers was they wanted experience. I mean, they're drafting 5-year seniors, 6-year seniors. So I thought the theme was to bring in experienced players. And a lot of these guys had a ton of production in college. So a lot of these players, I think, could help out. Now, are there any starters, immediate starters that they drafted? That's up for debate. But what they did do is gain experience, players who could step in potentially year one and make an immediate impact.
Yeah, and a lot of that is also kind of where we're at in the calendar, right? We're a couple of years removed from COVID and the whole pandemic. So NCAA granted many of those players like, an extra year. So some of these guys have been in college for 5 years. Some of them even had a 6th year. But I think you're right to point that out, is that the 49ers are inside their Super Bowl window. And so they don't want to draft guys that, hey, check with me in 3 years, because 3 years from now, who knows where they'll be and what the roster will look like. They're looking for guys who can contribute right away. As far as the question you raised, is there a starter in the bunch? It's really interesting. Pearsall, I think, could really be a contributor. I think Cowing potentially could be a starter, but that means that JJ sits down. So that's kind of an interesting one. But him and JJ Cowing and Jacob Cowing and Jawan Jennings are so different that they're almost like, more situational, like either could start, but it's really more about matchups. Then you look at Renardo Green. I think he has the potential to start as the third corner. I think Pooney's got potential to start at right guard. I think if there's a guy that, if you said make a wager on one guy starting from this draft, I would wager on Malik Mustafa. I just think that Hufanga is probably not going to be healthy at the get-go because of the torn ACL. And I think Malik Mustafa starts at free safety for the Niners. There's just not a lot of options there. And I love Mustafa, who can cover the field and hit. He's a little on the short side at 5'10", but he's a tremendous hitter, and he's got coverage ability. So I think Mustafa starts at free safety opposite Jair Brown.
That's a great point. Yeah, especially with Hufanga coming off the ACL. And I did my deep dive post-draft on Mustafa. And what I loved about him is the way this guy triggers and gets downhill versus the run. Like his acceleration, his knack, his instincts in run defense are apparent. Like he's a great run defender, in my opinion. That being said, Larry, and I'm interested to hear how you feel about it. I watched him versus Pitt, and I thought the coverage was a bit lackluster. Like the first touchdown that Pitt had, it's down in the red zone. A wide receiver's running a post right into Mustafa's zone, and he was just covering grass out there. Like he kind of had tunnel vision on the quarterback and didn't see the receiver kind of running right in his area. The ball kind of whizzed right by him for a touchdown. So that's just one play, though. But
I really like him. He's shorter, but he's the safety. First of all, I hated the safeties this year. I mean, I thought the safety crop this year was really, really lacking. I mean, there was only like maybe three to five safeties that I thought, man, this guy checks all my boxes as far as he's physical and can play the run, but he's also has enough coverage ability to actually cover in the deep third of the field. He played, as Lynch pointed out, the bandit position at Wake, which is kind of a jack of all trades, like almost like kind of like their wild card position, where sometimes they used him in coverage, sometimes they used him in the box, sometimes he's lined up inside the box like a run defender or like a weak side linebacker.
Yes,
other times
I saw that. Yeah.
Other times he's almost man to man on coverage. I think he's faster than he tests. He's instinctive. He knows how to play. He's really aggressive, and he's really smart. And if you heard the interview, a couple of the interviews that he's done, you can tell. I mean, this is a guy who really is a smart safety. So I'm not as, to me, like, they are just saying, always watch the film. And of course, right, you want to watch the film. But there are certain positions where you got to watch the film, but then you really got to look at those measurables, because if you don't have good enough 40 time as a receiver or as a corner, man, that's a real problem. But at safety, I mean, Fonga ran 4.76. 4.76. I mean, that's their linemen. I mean, Michael Hall from Ohio State ran 4.76 at 300 pounds. So that's not fast. But if you watch Tafanga play at SC, the guy knows how to play. He attacks the mesh point in the run game. He's really instinctive. He's flowing towards the football. So if you're a safety in this league, you got to be able to run a little bit. But if you have good instincts, I'll take a guy with instincts and marginal speed over a guy with great speed and lousy instincts. I mean, Tarvarius Moore. Can I raise that name to anybody? Does anybody remember the Steeler game a few years ago when Juju Smith-Schuster caught a 16-yard pass? Tarvarius Moore took a bad angle and he went for a touchdown. That's what happens when you have bad angles. That's what happens when you go for like workout freaks. You need to get safeties who can actually play, and then find out if they have what we would call requisite speed. And I think Mustafa does have requisite speed. We're going to find out. He probably is still better in the box, but I think he's better covering the field than Jair Brown or Talanoa. I like Jair as an interceptor. I just don't know about his coverage. He reminds me a little bit of a younger version of Gibson in that he'll pick off passes, and so you sit there and go, oh, he's a good coverage player, but then his coverage is not all that tight. So I'm interested to see where Mustafa fits in here, but I think he's a potential starter at free safety.
Interesting. So it sounds like if it is Mustafa and Jair Brown, if they're running a cover three, sounds like you would prefer Mustafa in center field, kind of as that deep third.
Yep. Yeah, and he would be the guy covering the blades of grass. Though I think Jair Brown's willing to do it. And he, as I said, he will, if you throw an errant pass, he's got a great nose for the ball. But I think Mustafa's coverage might be a little bit better than Brown's coverage. Brown's really good the nice thing is, the Niners can use their safeties interchangeably to some degree, and they're both really good in the box. But I just think I would say Mustafa's probably has a little bit more upside as a coverage player. But let's go back to, and we can, as far as the depth chart at safety, this was a real need for the Niners. I mean, think about it. I mean, you had Jair and you had Talanoa, and then you got George Odom, who's a great special teamer, but not necessarily a great player from scrimmage. And then what did you have after that? You had Taylor Hawkins, who I really like, but, he hasn't played a lot of safety. And then you had Eric Harris, whose story is amazing, guy who worked at a potato chip factory and went to a Canadian League tryout and eventually earned a multi-million-dollar contract from the Raiders years later. But he was considering quitting football, and he's got a big family and kids and all this stuff. He's a great dude, but he's kind of more of a practice squad level guy. So they needed a safety or two, and I thought they got a couple good ones here. I think Malik Mustafa is a pretty damn good player. And then I actually think the The other guy that I really kind of
Mahoney.
like is Jalen Mahoney from Vanderbilt. That was not a bad undrafted free agent. I think he's got a shot. So they were in need there, right? So most teams, like the Niners, carry most of the time 4 safeties. So I think the 4 safeties are going to be Hufanga, Brown, Odom, and Mustafa. And then Harris and Hawkins and Mahoney probably battling for one practice squad spot. But you never know. There's injuries and that kind of thing. But I liked what I saw from Mahoney. He's actually a pretty good little player.
Mahoney, watch him versus Georgia. He was flying all over the place. He had 16 tackles against Georgia. So, this Niner defense, these scouts, they love guys who fly around, who are aggressive, making tackles, and Mahoney fits that mold.
All right, let's go back to wide receiver because it started with wide receiver with Ricky Pearsall. And I've watched a lot of Ricky Pearsall. I've read all the reports. And the one thing that really comes out to me that's kind of like the question is just how tough is Ricky Pearsall? If you telling me he's super tough, then I love the draft choice. But if he's not super tough, he's playing in the middle of the field at a position where you're going to get hit a lot. And, can he get off the line of scrimmage? Can he maintain his feet? Can he keep his balance? To me, like there were scouts that questioned his balance. There were scouts who questioned his upside. But for me, it's all about toughness because some people say, well, he's a bigger, faster Julian Edelman. Okay, but Julian Edelman was enormously tough, hugely tough. And people say, well, he's kind of like Cooper Kupp. All right, well, I mean, other than the fact that he's white, I mean, is that why we're saying he's Cooper Kupp? But even so, if he is like Cooper Kupp is really, really a tough son of a gun and a great route runner. So, what'd you think? What was your feeling on Pearsall? Did you like that pick? Did you not like the pick? I mean, in some ways I can see exactly why they wanted him because in some ways you could argue that he's exactly what the doctor ordered if your quarterback's name is Brock Purdy.
Listen, Larry, the pick caught me off guard. I got to be honest. When Ricky Pearsall came across, I had watched him. I evaluated him. And, one of my first notes, this guy's a good third wide receiver. I want him in the slot for me. That being said, the first round, draft day, it did feel a bit rich. I was wondering, man, could we have traded back 10 spots, maybe picked up a third or fourth rounder and still gotten Pearsall? That being said, the more you watch him, the more I like the pick. I mean, I liked it to begin with, but watching him even more in depth, like his route running is nasty. Like he's got fakes. He can run all the routes. And Larry, I think that's why Kyle Shanahan picked Ricky Pearsall. It's because he's run it 11 times on crossing routes, caught all 11. So it's like the staple routes that Kyle likes to implement. Ricky Pearsall ran those routes at Florida and Arizona State for that matter. Whereas if you look at the guy who went a pick later, Xavier Legette caught 0 slant passes this past year. And the slant is a staple of Kyle's offense. So I think Kyle, saw Legette and, oh, you know what, this guy's not running over the middle. He's not that he can't do it, but he didn't. And I think Kyle likes to see stuff just to kind of further assure himself that, hey, this player can run the routes that I want to utilize them. Because like Legette's got the height, weight, speed, right? He's strong, but he didn't show, this is my opinion, I don't think he showed Kyle kind of the necessary tools that he likes to utilize. So Pearsall is the pick. He's a crisp route runner, 5th-year senior, a lot of experience, a lot of production. That being said, the players that he, I've seen these players comp to him, but yeah, Julian Edelman. Edelman was a 7th-round pick. Adam Thielen, comparable to Pearsall, he was undrafted. So it's like typically these type of receivers, I feel like, the wide receiver 3s, the slot guys don't go this high typically. So that's why it felt a bit like a reach. That being said, we talked pre-draft, and this was right after the Niners re-signed Trent Taylor, and we said, hey, Larry, you know what? This type of slot receiver might work really well with Brock Purdy, with how decisive, how accurate. You get a jitterbug in the slot, you give him a two-way go, you give him an option from the slot, and it's something Purdy could have a lot of success with. So I think Pearsall kind of fits that bill as a shifty slot receiver where, is he, you give him the option route, is he going out, is he going in? It's going to be tough to cover. I think that's going to work really well with Brock Purdy.
I'll be totally upfront. I wanted Zach Frazier. I wanted Ruka Rororo. I wanted Michael Hall. Johnny Newton. I wanted them to go line of scrimmage. Especially, I felt like that was the sweet spot. Like, that's where either center for Frazier, who I think was going to, the Steelers got Fatanu, Frazier, and Mason McCormick. I think the Steelers did incredibly well, and I would have loved to have gotten Frazier because I think he was a plug and play dominant center. But, a little bit short arms. Maybe that was it. They're pretty loaded on the defensive line. Maybe that was it. Maybe they're thinking about the future with Debo and Ayuk. I'll say this. I like Pearsall a lot more when you have Debo and Ayuk. If he's supposed to be the replacement for those guys, then I don't like it, really. I will say this, though. As much as I say I don't like it if he's a replacement for those guys, look what Brock Purdy is. Brock Purdy is a guy who can create extra time in the pocket by moving around because he's exceptionally quick. Probably the most underrated trait of Brock Purdy is the quickness, right? He's got quickness like a much, much more athletic quarterback than he appears to be at first glance. So that's, to me, like the one trait that really separates him. There's other mental traits as far as processing and that kind of thing. But as far as athleticism-wise, he's not the biggest guy. He doesn't have the biggest arm. He doesn't throw the lasers that much. But his accuracy is incredible. The ball comes out on time, but what really separates him is he buys a little bit of extra time. And I just think that there's a chance that Ricky Pearsall is going to lead to a lot of victories. And why? Because I just think that Brock's going to, use his athleticism to change platform, to change launch point, and then all of a sudden Pearsall's going to separate. And once these guys are like on the same page with, where Brock knows where Ricky's going to be and Ricky kind of has a good feel for Brock, I think it could be borderline unstoppable on like 3rd and 5, 3rd and 6. It's like you got those two guys, a great route runner with incredible ball skills, running to a free open spot, freeing himself up, Purdy on the move, finding that receiver that frees himself up. I think, it's like, I would have preferred other receivers. I'd rather have gone with Ladd McConkey. He was a little bit faster for the stopwatch, but he had durability concerns. I liked Leggett, but, I knew that there was going to be a transition there. He's raw. He only really had one good year at South Carolina. It was that final year. Could have gone with offensive or defensive lineman, but I don't want to be too critical of the Pearsall pick because I can picture, Brock Purdy lives in the middle of the field. And this guy makes his money in the middle of the field. And I just think that if they, you get into training camp and you get into the preseason and these guys start to get some field time with each other, especially they're both from Arizona. And as much as Pearsall's like, you got yourself a good one. I like guys who show outward confidence in their abilities. I like guys who are like, man, I'm good and I know it. And he's kind of in that category. I think he could be maybe one of the Niners' best continuity pieces from the standpoint of, man, you want to stay on the field for those long drives, but you got to convert on 3rd down. Now you got a guy that could absolutely be a perfect guy to just kind of, have that great rapport. Kind of like Puka. I hate to say it. I don't think the Niners would have taken Pearsall at 31 if Puka Nacua wasn't the star of last year's draft. I think it's a copycat league. Everybody saw all the stop routes and the short routes that Puka ran this year for Stafford. And Stafford with his laser just lasered him in there. And, he knew that Puka was going to little stop route, little in cut, little out cut. And, it's like he's throwing with anticipation. Well, Purdy throws with that same, he doesn't have the laser that Stafford has, but he throws with even better anticipation and maybe even better accuracy. And I just think the combo could be really, really hard to stop, even if you kind of, no Purdy's looking for Pearsall. If Pearsall runs a little out route and Purdy throws that out route with anticipation, I think that could be borderline almost impossible to stop. So I like the upside of the two of them together once they start to learn each other.
Absolutely. I think it's going to be a great combo. Now, one concern I have with Pearsall, maybe you can kind of ease my mind on this one, but I want to see how he is against press. Not
right.
because he's slighter, and not only for that reason, but also, he had a good 40-yard dash, the 4.41. But I know you like to keep an eye on the 10-yard split. The 10-yard split was below average. The 157 10-yard split is below the 50th percentile of wide receivers. And I feel like you kind of see that on the tape. When the ball snapped, I want my receivers kind of exploding off the line of scrimmage, forcing the DB into a back pedal. I didn't quite see that as much as I wanted to. Like, how do you think he's going to hold up versus the press? And do you see kind of the average 10-yard split show up on the tape?
Yeah, I mean, he's not going to beat you. I mean, to me, and this is all tied into my evaluation on the toughness. I mean, it's like, how does he get off the line of scrimmage? Can he keep his feet? Or are they just gonna, shuck him at the line of scrimmage and he goes to the ground, and now, your 3 wide receiver set is more like a 2 wide receiver set because this guy's on the ground. So that's my concern. Mike, if he's really tough and he can maintain his balance and get into his route and get, a clean break off the line of scrimmage, and then when he does take hits in the middle of the field, if he's not affected by those hits, he doesn't have, short arming it and hearing footsteps and that kind of thing. To me, it's all about his toughness.
Stuff. No Dante Pettis. I got to say, when we drafted him, and it's just the build, kind of the slighter frame. I'm like, oh man, is this guy another Dante Pettis? He's not.
He's faster than Pettis and tougher.
He's way tougher. Yeah, you saw him go over the middle at Florida, and he's not afraid. Whereas Pettis is alligator arming some of these balls.
Yeah. So now let's look at the wide receiver position. So, how many receivers are they going to carry? I mean, most teams carry 5, sometimes 6. A rare team will carry 7. They have 11 right now. Here are their receivers today: Debo, Ayuk, Jennings, Pearsall, Jacob Cowing, who we've yet to discuss, but I love him. He's my favorite draft choice. Ronnie Bell, Trent Taylor, who was sure-handed punt returner, Tay Martin, Chris Conley, Danny Gray, and Terrell Owens' kid, Tariq, who's, interesting, but he's headed for the practice squad. I mean, do you keep Samuel and Debo and Jennings and the 2 rookies and then cut everybody else? You're going to cut Ronnie Bell in year 2. You're going to cut Trent Taylor. You're going to cut Tay Martin. Chris Conley had a nice little Super Bowl. You're going to cut Danny Gray. You're going to cut, or maybe if one of the 2 of those guys has a good camp, maybe a trade one. I mean, how many receivers do you think they keep?
I think they're going to keep 6. They kept 6 last year. Danny Gray, me and you, we both like Danny Gray coming out of SMU. I remember we talked about it.
Yeah.
And I got to admit, he's been banged up. We haven't seen him a ton. So I think Danny Gray's a trade candidate. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets traded, for a 6th or 7th round pick coming up here come training camp time. But let's look
somebody
at
who needs vertical speed. Maybe he comes
probably
knocking. I mean, he's going to have to show something in the preseason, I think, before anybody's even going to trade anything for him.
True.
Remember when Trey Lance in the Green Bay preseason game went up top to Danny Gray, and we're all sitting there going, "This is the future. This is the future." We never saw it again. Yeah. Never saw it again.
And I feel like the Danny Gray pick, it was for Trey Lance. Let's get the speedster for our big arm quarterback. And then as soon as, Lance kind of fizzled, it was downhill from there with Danny Gray. But the locks for this wide receiver room: Brandon Ayuk, Debo Samuel, Ricky Pearsall, Juwan Jennings. We'll talk about Cowing, but just where they drafted him, I think he's going to make it. That's 5. So, in my opinion, Chris Conley, I think you're going to try to squeeze him back onto the practice squad again, even though he was pretty good. He got some run in the Super Bowl. But in my opinion,
he's kind of in that Willie Snead mode. I mean, I know Willie's pissed, but he's kind of in that Willie Snead mode. Conley is where, hey, you know what? You're now that you have 16 guys in the practice squad and they have the veterans, able to be on there, in some ways he's the perfect practice squad veteran. He's not old. He can still play. I think that's a good call. I think he's practice squad.
Yeah, he knows the system. He was here last year. But in my opinion, Danny Gray, Trent Taylor, and Ronnie Bell are the three that are going to be fighting for one spot. Only one of those guys is making the roster. So Danny, Trent Taylor, Ronnie Bell. It's going to be a camp battle to monitor.
Well, if you have, okay, so let's talk Cowing. I think Cowing, Scott McLuhan did the interview with Matt Barrows, and he said his favorite guy was Cowing. And I love Cowing as well. I mean, I saw him at UTEP, and then the same player I saw at UTEP, I saw in the Pac-12 with the Arizona Wildcats. And his last two games, one against ASU and the other against Oklahoma in the bowl game, those two games he combined for 15 catches for over 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. Those were his final 2 college games. This guy's small, but he's kind of like an Iverson in that he's just like, don't tell him he's small. You know what I mean? This guy's kind of tough. And to me, he kind of, now granted, Tyreek ran 4.2 something, and this guy ran 4.3 something. So it's not quite the same speed. But in some ways, he reminds me a little bit of Tyreek in that he's short, but he's not necessarily weak. You know what I mean? Tyreek is kind of strong and short. This guy's not quite as strong as Tyreek, but I think he's got that route running ability, the ball skills. I mean, when you have ball skills and 4.3 speed and route running ability, all the boxes that I need to check are checked. You know what I mean? I mean, when you run 4.38 and you have ball skills and you can run routes, and you have real precision based footwork, I think you're going to get. I think Cowing's going to be a instant impact guy. I think he can take hits. I think he's going to drive teams crazy. I think he's got way better ball skills than Niner fans realize. He's not like Danny Gray's fast, but Danny Gray, there's a softness to Danny Gray, and he hasn't been able to stay healthy. I don't think this Cowing, there's any softness at all. I think this guy's a route running monster who's got 4.3 speed, and I think it's going to be a big play and add a major dimension to their offense. So I think Cowing, and I'll say it right now to you, and I was telling Croc this earlier today. I said, make a bold prediction. And I said, I'll go first to give you time. I think Cowing's going to be better than Pearsall, and I think Cody Schrader, that is going to be better than Garendo. And I'll stay with that. Yeah.
I like that. Yeah, with Cal, I agree with everything you said about Jacob Cowing. What I'll add is that this dude's really good after the catch. Like there really was a few 5'8" or 5'9" wide receivers in this draft.
Right.
Jacob Cowing was the best
Oregon
one.
State, and there was a bunch of little speedsters.
Cowing was the best one by far.
Right.
I
agree.
Usually I'm not really interested in that profile of a receiver, but when I saw Cowing with the route running and how good he is after the catch, like he will juke you, Larry. He's not going to run over you. He's not very big, but he will juke you. He's a jitterbug who will make you miss in one-on-one situations. Like Cowing's got that rare ability, and you talked about the production. When we drafted him, I was just looking at, what kind of production did this guy have, over his 5-year career, right? And it's like he had a 60 catch year. He had a 70 catch year. He had an 80 catch year. He damn near caught 90 balls in a season.
He was the only guy in the FBS this year that caught 90 balls and had over 12 touchdowns.
It was insane. He had so much production throughout his college career. I ended up looking it up, Larry. I'm like, where does this rank amongst just like D1 players? The dude's top 10 in receiving yards, and he's top 10 in receptions all time for Division I players. That's how productive this guy was.
Yeah. No, I love him. And it's funny. I was talking to Eric Crocker today. He said that Cowing's his favorite. And McLuhan said that Cowing was his favorite. So I think, the fact that I also felt that way after watching all the film on these guys. I feel really, really good about him. So here's the question I would have. Okay, so you have, 11 receivers. Usually teams go with 10 combined wide receivers or running backs. So if you got 6 receivers, you got 4 running backs. If you got 5 of, a lot of teams go with 5 and 5, 5 receivers, 5 running backs. The most anybody would typically commit to receivers and running backs combined would be 11 combined. Well, the Niners have Debo, Ayuk, Jennings, Ricky Pearsall, Jacob Cowing, and we're giving them a 6th receiver between Bell, Trent Taylor, Tay Martin, Chris Conley, Danny Gray, Tariq Owens. So that's 6 receivers. And then when you go to running back, you got McCaffrey, Mitchell, Mason, Juszczyk, who counts as a running back, and then Garendo and Cody Schrader. They also have Patrick Taylor, but I'm not really considering him, even though they did sign him as a free agent. So that's 6. If you just don't count Patrick Taylor and you just go McCaffrey, Mitchell, Mason, Garendo, Juszczyk, and Schrader, you got 6 running backs there, and we're talking about 6 receivers. That's 12. I think that's probably one too many. I think they're probably going to wind up making a cut. To me, the most interesting part of all the draft evaluations that I saw and read was from Scott McLuhan, who said that he thinks that Isaac Garendo, unless he plays special teams and really has a big preseason, is not going to make the final 53-man roster. They traded 2 fifth-round picks to get into the 4th round to take Garendo. What do you think of him? What do you think of Garendo?
Yeah, I'm really intrigued by Garendo. Okay, this is a guy who came on in his 5th year, didn't have much production at Wisconsin. It wasn't until he transferred to Louisville where he finally got to tote the rock. And where I think, again, this is what Kyle goes back to. I want to see these guys do what I like to run in the NFL. So Kyle, he likes to run under center. Louisville was one of the few teams that ran a lot of plays under center. And that's where I really liked Garendo. When he's in the shotgun, I'm not sure how he sees it. I don't think he really hits the hole that well. But when they went under center and handed him the ball, I saw that one-cut ability that I know Kyle likes. He's that one-cut runner when he's under center. So that's where I think they preferred Garendo, because when they're running that under center offense, this is a guy with 4.3 speed. I mean, the only 2 prospects in the last 20 years that weigh at least 220 pounds and ran at least a 4.33, Isaac Garendo and DK Metcalf. This dude's got a rare ability, a size speed combo. It's rare.
No doubt. And if you saw him in the bowl game against SC, you'd be sold. I think he had 160 yards. I think he went for 6 yards a pop. He had a couple touchdowns. I mean, he just dominated SC in the bowl game. They gave him number 49. That to me is a fullback number. And I'll tell you,
wasn't Bruce Miller 49?
I think he was. Bruce Miller. Did I ever tell you my Bruce Miller story?
No. Don't tell me he punched you. Remember
Bruce Miller and I were tight. We were close.
Okay,
we were buds, right? So I interviewed him a bunch of times, and he was a really nice guy, right? But obviously he liked to have a few pops, and he got drunk one night. He was down at Pier 39, and he got into an altercation with an older guy, and I think grabbed his cane and maybe hit him with it in a parking garage, right? Did you ever hear that story at all?
Yeah, that was where I was going, yeah.
So obviously the Niners, and this was after I think he had left the Niners. Anyway, this is several years ago, and we're down in the Gas Lamp District in San Diego, but it was after the Niners cut him loose. So sometime after Super Bowl 47 was what year? That was 2013. So maybe it's 2014, right? 2015. And he's no longer on the Niners, and he's no longer in the league, and he had that altercation. And I'm walking around with my family in San Diego down in the Gas Lamp, and we bump into each other. And I'm like, Bruce. He's like, Krug, what's up? We kind of dap up. We talk for a couple of minutes and this and that, right? And I'm like, oh man, he's a good dude. He's a good dude. So my wife's like, who is that? And I'm like, oh, that's Bruce Miller, the Niner fullback. She's like, oh, he's still on the team. And I'm like, no, he's their former fullback. She's like, oh, he looks so young. And I'm like, well, so now I have to kind of tell her the story, right? So I'm kind of telling her the story. And my kids, in 2014, so that was basically 10 years ago. So my 14-year-old was 4. My 19-year-old was 9, right? And my older 2 might have been early teens. And so I told my wife the story about how, he got into this situation at Pier 39 in a parking garage, and he grabbed some guy who's a senior's cane, and he actually hit him with it. And my 4-year-old looks at me and just goes, "But Daddy, why is he your good friend?" And I seriously was flat-footed. I had to explain why a football player who would hit a senior citizen with his own cane in a parking garage, why he was my buddy. It was like the 4-year-old, the 9-year-old were like, give me that look like, why is Daddy friends with somebody who beat up an old person with a cane? Anyway, but there you go. That's my long Bruce Miller story. But I did like him, and he was a good player for a while. But no, they gave Guerrero 49. And I'll tell you, he was Mr. Football in the state of Indiana coming out of high school as a wide receiver. So he can catch the ball. And then I saw several examples in his film of him just blowing up people as a blocker. So this guy can block. I'm intrigued by the possibility, and I don't know if maybe I'm the only one who sees it this way, because every time I mention it, some people are like, I don't know about that. I don't see running back traits. I don't see pick and slide. I don't see, that sharp cutting lateral agility that I see with all great running backs. I see a big, kind of heavy, like built, like strong up top, like a little top heavy, looks really powerful in the upper body. 225-pound running back, but he's kind of a trap runner. He doesn't have that ability to kind of slither through tiny holes and that kind of thing. I see a fullback. But I see an exciting fullback, because think about it. Let's say this guy made the team and was a fullback, and you have all these weapons out in the pattern, and then you have this guy at fullback, and you throw him the ball in the flat, and he's probably being covered by a relatively slowish linebacker, right? Because you got all these other weapons. And then he gives that guy a juke, and he all of a sudden he takes his 4.33 speed down the sideline. I'm what do you honestly think Juszczyk has left in the tank? If Guerrero showed something, last year they brought in Coletto. He didn't really challenge Juice. I know they reworked Juice's deal, but I could see Guerrero being kind of like almost like the futuristic fullback who can block, who can catch, and if you get him isolated in space against a slowish pass defender, could maybe take it to the house and be a big play fullback with 4.3 speed. What do you think? I definitely don't think he's a running back, man. And I don't think he'll beat out those other running backs if he is a running back. I think he's a fullback.
I think that's really intriguing. They like to utilize Juice on some wheel routes or
right.
In the flat. But imagine the 4.33. Imagine a linebacker trying to keep up with a 4.33 fullback on a wheel route. Like
right.
That's going to be tough to deal with. So that's really interesting. I hadn't thought of that, but with how big he is and how strong he is, that's something that could happen. I couldn't rule it out. Don't
you need to cut
stonewalling linebackers in pass pro? So this is a willing blocker. Like you said, he can catch it. So that's really intriguing to me. I always thought I like Braden Willis maybe as the backup fullback. I thought Willis could kind of do some fullback things, but Guerrero would be way more explosive than that.
Way more explosive. I want to show you. Did you see the tweet I put out of him the other day? I'm going to show this. I'm going to share the screen. Tell me what you think of this one. Okay, so this was on Twitter. Here is Grendo blocking. Let me see if I can back this thing up a little bit. He's in the backfield offset, and the defensive end the right defensive end comes on a stunt, and Grendo stonewalls this guy. Watch this.
Lumber's going to run it. 2 timeouts remain.
Whoa, that's a pancake.
Well, we'll see it again. Here it is.
Larry. He pancaked him.
Boom.
Lumber's going to run it. 2 timeouts.
That's a defensive end, and then he got downfield. Once again.
Crumbled him.
Boom. You can hear it.
That looks like a guy who plays fullback right there.
Yeah, it looks like a fullback. I mean, that's a big-time hit right there. So I saw a couple of plays that were like that, and I thought, wow, maybe this guy is a fullback. And I'll say this. I mean, the Niners are going to have to come up with several guys. I don't know, several, but multiple guys who make big money are going to have to get cut in the next year, right? Because you're going to have to make room for Brock Purdy. Juszczyk to Grendo might be a way to cut money, but add a dynamic element to the offense. I mean, I like Juszczyk as a player. I like Juszczyk as a guy. He's a good leader, but I mean, he's not. I mean, I don't want to say he's not worth the money they're paying him. I don't know. That sounds so callous, but you know what I'm saying? He's getting paid well. And I think this guy could do everything he does, and then maybe even give you an element that Juice never could give you. So I kind of like the Grendo possibility at fullback. To me, the one of the greatest additions of this offseason, and nobody's talking about it because we're conditioned to believe that the first round pick is the best, the second round pick is the second best, the third round pick's the third best. Everybody on the third day is just a guy, and guys who aren't drafted are not even that, right? But I mean, I think we should all adjust our thinking now that we've seen Brock Purdy be the last pick in the draft. Now that we've seen the Niners get Jeff Wilson, Raheem Mostert, Azeez Al-Shaair, Kevin Givens, all, after the draft as undrafted free agents. I think we ought to change our view of the thing and just kind of realize that there's first round picks, then there's like second and third round picks, and then everybody else, it's kind of beauty in the eye of the beholder, right? And it's like, there could be a great fifth round pick. There could be a bust who doesn't make your team in the fifth round. There could be a great undrafted player there, and then there could be several that are just, future whatever. They're going to drive trucks or do other jobs, future other occupation guys, as Kuiper calls them, OOGs, other occupation guys. I think Cody Schrader, and I'm not saying this because the Niners got him. I was a Cody Schrader fan all year. He was the running back at Missouri. To me, I don't know if we talked about this, but the running back that I love the most in this draft was Blake Corum, who went to the Rams, by the way, in the third round. Blake Corum and Kyron Williams are going to be a really good combo.
Rams had a great draft.
Rams had a great draft.
The Rams had a Jared Verse, Brandon Fisk, Blake Corum. I really liked the Rams draft.
Bo Limmer, they got Bo Limmer late, who's a terrific center. But Cody Schrader is an NFL back. He reminds me of Blake Corum. He's 5'9". Now he did all the measurables and all that stuff at the combine. I think at the pro day or whatever it was. And I think it was like they measured him at 208, or they weighed him at 208. But he was listed all year at 5'9", 220, 215. And I think that's more of his playing weight. He's about 5'8", 5'9", about 215 pounds. I love the guy. He was the first team all SEC running back, the best conference in America. There was Dejon Edwards from Georgia. Bama had a bunch of guys, McClellan. You had Tennessee had Jalen Wright. Well, who was the first team all SEC running back? Cody Schrader from Missouri. The guy ran big against over 5 yards a carry against Georgia, 200 yards against Arkansas, 200 yards against Tennessee. Huge day against the Buckeyes, big day against all the best teams he ran huge against. And he's small and he runs 4.61, but I don't even really care that much because he's obviously quick enough and fast enough to get it done in the SEC. The guy went for 6 yards a pop in the SEC on the season. So to me, I think that's the steal. You say, what's the steal of the Niner draft? It's this kid. It's Cody Schrader from Missouri. And as I said, I think Schrader will beat out Guerrero. I think Schrader makes the team. But then you've got McCaffrey and you have Mitchell and you have Mason. I mean, they didn't even use Mitchell and Mason. So a lot of people was listening to this going, Krug, they didn't even run Mason or Mitchell last year. Why do they need Schrader? Well, I mean, you're going to eventually need some depth at running back. But I think this kid is real. And I love the addition. I was shocked that they were able to attract him to come here. But it kind of shows that Bobby T has, there's a lot of respect around football for Bobby T. And he obviously called this kid a ton and recruited him heavily. And this is a major, major steal. Major steal. I don't know how much you watched, but he has the pick and slide. He has the instincts that Guerrero doesn't really have. He doesn't have Guerrero's 4.3 speed. If you could combine these guys, it would be awesome. But
yeah, I'd be a Hall of Famer.
Yeah. I mean, if you could take
what I like about Schrader, when you watch Schrader, the instincts, the vision, and it's the decisiveness, right? He gets the rock. He's not lollygagging behind the line of scrimmage. He gets the rock. He's decisive. He finds the hole, and that's where that great vision comes into play. And he's a talented guy. Now, that being said, I think Schrader, Guerrero, JP Mason, those guys are probably all fighting for one spot. And what stinks, Krug, is that, and I know I think you're a proponent for this too, but we barely even saw JP Mason. It's like JP Mason averages 6 yards a carry whenever he gets the rock, but he barely ever touched the rock. So it'd be kind of a shame to let JP Mason go before I think we really see what he has. That being said, Schrader, Guerrero, JP Mason, I'm wondering, do you think Eli Mitchell has any trade value at this point? He's a safe ball carrier. He doesn't fumble the rock. Not the flashiest guy, but do you think the Niners would entertain maybe getting a sixth or a late pick for this guy?
Maybe. I mean, they definitely have a log jam of talented players there. Elijah Mitchell's too good to cut. That's for sure. And I would not cut Mason either. He's just too big. By the way, it's over. T-Wolves are up 2-0. 2-0 series lead, second straight series for the T-Wolves. They won game 1 and game 2 in Denver. How about that?
Wow.
That's amazing. No, but yeah, as far as what your trade point, I think it's possible. I don't think you're going to get a whole lot for Mitchell or Mason unless they just went off in the preseason. And if they went off in the preseason, you probably wouldn't want to trade them. But they're loaded. They're loaded at those two spots, running back and wide receiver. So very interesting. All right, let's move to quarterback. The Niners have Brock Purdy. He's their 1. They have Josh Dobbs. He's the 2. They have Brandon Allen. He's the 3. And then they have had a really good eye for quarterbacks the last couple of years. A couple of years ago, they got Brock. This year, they signed Tanner Mordecai from Wisconsin. And when I first saw the name, I didn't bat an eye. I didn't really think anything of it. I just thought, I watched Tanner Mordecai a little bit in college, but not a lot. I never really studied him, his traits, or I didn't know his story. Baller. The more I started watching Tanner Mordecai, the more I started seeing why they like Tanner Mordecai. He runs 4.46. He's got a strong arm. He's smart. He's competitive. He's mentally mature. He's been in 3 different offenses the last few years. He had 39 touchdowns and 10 picks a year ago. He had 32 touchdowns and 12 picks the year before that. So, I mean, he put up big numbers at SMU. He had 9 touchdowns in a game against Houston. He had 7 touchdown passes in his first game against Abilene Christian. Mordecai has a little bit. I mean, I was talking to Todd Husak about him. Husak thinks he's got some work on his motion that's a little bit of a loop.
Yeah, I see that.
But when I watch the kid, I'm like, he's a lot of what you're looking for. The ball comes out on time. He throws the short and intermediate stuff. He's a great game manager. He's got 4.46 speed. And when he takes off to run, he's pretty courageous. He's running in the middle of the field. He's making guys miss. He's got a bigger arm than Brock. He doesn't have quite the accuracy, but in a short and intermediate range, he seemed plenty accurate. He completed 67% of his passes. They say he's a film junkie. I watched a couple of the interviews that he did this year. He reminds me a lot of Brock. You know, he's this kind of mentally mature, very like humble, but very confident. He's 6'2", about 215. So he's about kind of the same size in that 215, 220 range. He might be a half inch taller than Brock. But the 4.46 speed, he's an athlete. And this guy had a 53-yard touchdown run. You can tell, you know, a couple of the people that I saw talking about him said he's an authentic leader. And that's kind of what Brock is. He's an authentic leader. So I don't know, man. I mean, I'm not saying that Tanner Mordecai is, you know, I would term it at this. I would phrase it this way. If it comes right down to, is he something or is he nothing? I'd put my name to it that he's something. He's not nothing. And I don't know about you, but I'm not a Dobbs guy. And I'm not a Brandon Allen guy. Now, I like Brandon Allen. He's smart. But I don't think Brandon Allen's special by any stretch. I think he's just kind of a guy. And nothing against Brandon. I just don't think he's awesome. I think he's lacking in arm strength and foot speed, and he's just kind of okay, right? I don't think. And Dobbs, I mean, anybody who watched Dobbs in that Vikings-Bears Monday night game late in the year, I mean, he was total horseshit in that game. He was terrible.
I got to jump in though, Lair.
He threw 3 picks. He could have thrown 5.
How long was he studying that playbook though? Like he had literally just got traded there. I'm of the proponent.
It wasn't the first week, or I think it might have been the second or third week he was there. But I hear what you're saying though.
You need at least a month to understand the playbook. You know, get the chemistry down with your wide receivers. Dobbs had none of that. So I want to throw.
Do you like Dobbs?
Caveat. I think Dobbs is a solid backup. Like when
he looked good against the Niners. I
was at that game too, so maybe that's kind of lingering.
He did. He looked really good against Dallas the week prior to the Niners.
Dobbs is a guy. I mean, can we get him with the same team, like for a training camp, you know, for a whole season? And I think that's what's going to happen here with the Niners. He was on 3 different teams last year. You know, this guy, he was bouncing around, learning new systems. I think Dobbs, he's a smart guy. I think he's going to pick up this offense, and I think he's a solid backup to Brock Purdy. That being said, getting back to Tanner Mordecai.
Better or worse than Darnold?
You know, I think it's about even. Like, I think those guys are like, they're in the same tier, in my opinion. Like, they're backup quarterbacks. And now Darnold might get a starting shot with the Vikings, you know, while they get the rookie up to speed. But they're both backups. They're in that same tier of solid to good backup quarterbacks, in my opinion. So I think those are pretty close. But getting back to Mordecai, well, when I saw we signed him as an undrafted free agent, I'm like, this is a name I feel like I've heard for the last 6 years, because we have heard Tanner Mordecai for the last 6 years.
Yeah.
And you mentioned it. This dude had some extremely productive years with SMU, 39 touchdowns. I mean, he was when we were watching that Danny Gray film, that Rashee Rice film, it was Tanner Mordecai was the one slinging him the rock. So we've seen Mordecai. He's got some tools. Like when I was watching him, it's almost, I mean, he's not Baker Mayfield, but just with the size and kind of with the strong arm and, you know, some mobility. He's quicker than Baker. But I was like, man, this guy kind of reminds me of Baker a little bit. But yeah, I think he should be able to challenge Brandon Allen for the QB3 spot. You mentioned it. He's got some mobility. He's got a pretty strong arm. I do see kind of a longer release. But that being said, as an undrafted guy, I'm on board with the signing.
Yeah, I was impressed. You know, now I didn't have any preconceived notions about the guy. But if you go read his story, he goes to Oklahoma. First of all, in high school, he's a 4-star recruit. So it wasn't like it was like just some bum. I mean, this guy was a highly recruited guy. And it wasn't like he played in a major metro area. He's born in Waco. You know, he went to Midway High School in Waco, but he was a 4-star high school recruit. Who's getting all the best quarterbacks in recent years out of high school? Oklahoma. And sure enough, Oklahoma landed him. He lost the job the first year to Kyler Murray. No shame in that. Second year, he competed with Jalen Hurts, and Hurts beat him out. He was the backup to Hurts in 2019. Third year, he wound up sharing the job with Spencer Rattler. He only actually played in 12 games at Oklahoma. So he transfers in 2021 to SMU and lights it up. As I said, I mean, the numbers are unbelievable. 32 touchdowns, 10 picks, 39 touchdowns, 12 picks. So he had 2 years back to back combined where we're talking about 70 touchdowns and 71 touchdowns and 22 picks in a 2-year run. It's pretty damn good. So then he goes to Wisconsin, and he didn't play great for Wisconsin. It's a tougher conference as far as defense. But he had 9 touchdowns, 4 picks for Wisconsin. In the Iowa game, which was, I think, towards the back end of the year, he breaks his right hand, his throwing hand. And I think it was Luke Fickell said, what I loved about this kid is there was never any doubt whether or not he was going to play against LSU in the bowl game. He was like, hell yeah, I'm playing against LSU in the bowl game. What did he do in the bowl game? He completed 68% of his passes for 378 yards, 3 touchdowns, and no picks. They wound up losing like 35-31 in a shootout to a much better LSU team. But that's a pretty damn good LSU team that had all kinds of guys that were drafted. And this guy lit it up 5 weeks after he broke his throwing hand. He played in that game. The guy's got a strong arm. One of the reports I read said he has a cannon, but didn't get invited to the combine. But then when you watch the film, all those passes that the Niners kind of utilize, I mean, he was throwing those with accuracy. The ball got out quickly. And then he was displaying that 4.46 speed. There's the kid clearly plays with confidence and he's accurate. He plays with toughness. He played hurt. He's like a fiery competitor. There's several examples where his team scores a touchdown. He's pumping his fist and he's running into the end zone. I mean, and he's got 4.46 speed. How many quarterbacks? That's like 90th percentile. I believe there's only one quarterback all year that ran better than 4.46 at the combine. So I don't know. We'll see. I mean, I'll say that the skill set is intriguing. Let's just say that. I don't know if he's
you're
going to
get a look at him here next week, huh? Rookie minicamp.
Yeah, this week. I think Friday, Saturday they're on the field. So I'll tell you what I see. But I mean, I went from who the hell's Tanner Mordecai to, you know what? I could see Tanner Mordecai beating out Brandon Allen for that third spot. Now he's going to have to be damn good because Brandon Allen was a backup to Burrow. He's, been in the Super Bowl. I mean, he's very
got
dependable.
NFL experience. He's started games in the NFL. Yeah.
He started games. He's really smart. He's just, Mordecai will have to be better than Brandon Allen. And even then they may try to slip him through waivers, but I'll tell you, if this guy, after Purdy, if this guy looks really good in the preseason and looks good in camp, I think he wouldn't clear waivers. I think somebody would hawk the Niners and be like, hey, they got a pretty good eye for things. And I'd love to, here's the other thing. It's kind of come out that Steve Slowick, who's Bobby Slowick's brother, and Brian Greasy were the two guys that really pounded the table for Brock Purdy. And to the Lynch said that with somebody earlier this week, said, once Brian Greasy had the conviction in him, it really convinced him and Shanahan to take a harder look at Purdy. And obviously, even though they love Greasy, they didn't take Purdy till the last round. But I wonder if Greasy pounded the table for Mordecai. I'll say this. If Mordecai is a good prospect and the Niners got him as an undrafted free agent a couple of years after they got Brock Purdy, and the key factor is Brian Greasy like these guys, as far as I'm concerned, Brian Greasy could be a made man. You know what I mean? He could write his ticket for as long as he wants to stay. If he's got the kind of evaluation ability where he could see the greatness in Purdy before others and could maybe see the talent in Mordecai before others, and they both pan out as legit, that's a pretty good little feather in your cap if you're Greasy. I mean, having an, Harbaugh was viewed as the quarterback whisperer. And I don't know if that actually was the case, but after he, had Andrew Luck and turned Alex Smith into a good player, I can see why people said that. But if Greasy really does, if he was a key factor in identifying Purdy, and we know what Purdy is, and if he's the key factor in identifying Mordecai, and Mordecai looks good this summer, man, Greasy might be, worth keeping around just for that alone.
Yeah, he's turning into the czar of QB scouts.
Well, I mean, the hardest thing to scout in the NFL is the quarterback. The hardest thing by far is the quarterback.
And it is. I agree with that, Larry, because you're talking to the guy who I was in on Zach Wilson. I thought Baker was going to be a stud. So the quarterback, that's the one position I'm still, your evaluation process is fluid, right? You gotta learn year in and year out. So you tweak it, but the QB position's hard to scout. Zach Wilson was the second pick of the draft because they thought he was going to be a stud. And these GMs are making millions.
Yeah.
It ain't easy.
No, it is not easy. Not easy at all. All right, let's move to tight end. They didn't get a tight end, but the guy that I told you and others that was the sleeper tight end.
You did. You said, baller, check out Mason Pline out of Furman. You told me that before the draft. And I said, okay, basketball player, 6'7". That does sound intriguing. But go ahead.
10-inch hands, mechanical engineering major, basketball player who looks like a high riser, kind of has an above the rim game. I was shocked that they found Pline, but they found him and they signed him. And I still think I would probably try to bring in another tight end because I don't know about Latou. You heard Shanahan, didn't you, when Shanahan was asked about Cam Latou? They're like, is Cam Latou your number 2 quarterback? He's like, no. Yeah, I couldn't say no fast enough. It's like, wow. Shanahan really doesn't like
the
Cam Latou
pick. I hated it from the start. Like when I watched him last year, I think I moved off him so quickly after watching like one game. I was like, I think my notes I wrote is just, he's just not that guy. He's just not that guy. And then the Niners took him in the 3rd round, Larry.
And he was a linebacker. We do have a super here. Go ahead and read that for me since I'm so blind these days.
It's from Jay in the Bay. That's my guy. What's up, Jay? He said, what's good? Baller and Larry legend. Hey, Baller, are you a fan of Willie Snead? What did you think of his comments? Larry and Bruce on Wake Up is A++++. Hey, no doubt, Jay. Appreciate that super chat. I did see the Willie Snead comments, and that sounds a bit like sour grapes. I mean, Willie, if you're so disgruntled with kind of just being the backup, like practice squad player, why did you come back a second time? Like he chose to come back to the Niners a second year. So it's like you really felt like that after year one, then, why didn't you look for greener pastures? But you came back. I just think, Willie, sometimes it's hard for these athletes to kind of come to grips that, hey, I'm aging. I'm not as highly coveted as I once was. I think there's some of that. But I know Willie a lot.
I love
better
Willie,
than I
man.
do.
Willie's a dude. Willie's a great guy. I was shocked when I first saw this because I was like, really? I can't imagine that Willie, who's such a been there, done that veteran, why he would speak out. Okay, I'm going to give you my theory on it. And I don't know if you've heard me say this in another live stream, but this is my quick theory on it. The practice squad started off, the origins of it was 4 guys. And then they said, hey, we need more guys. So then they doubled it up and they said it's going to be 8 guys. And then they said, well, but we need more guys. So they doubled it up again and they made it 16 guys. So now there's 16 guys in the practice squad. Well, when they doubled it from 8 to 16, they changed the rules. It used to be just for young guys, like, guys in their first, second year. But what they'd said was, Now you can have anybody on the practice squad. Yeah. If you want to have 20 guys that are all 35 years or 16 guys that are all 35 years old, go for it. Or you could have all guys that are rookies if you want. Nobody's going to, but you have now the ability to have veterans. I think what happens, the Niners took guys like Conley and Willie Snead, and they put them on the, they signed them to the practice squad. Those guys knew what they were getting themselves into. And then a couple times last year, they designated on a Saturday before a game Willie Snead to be activated, and they activated him, and he played. And if you watch him in practice, he's still moving great. And he had a terrific preseason. He had a terrific training camp. He looked as good or as fast or explosive as I've ever seen him. So I just think that he's now that it's summer, it's summer and he's looking for a job. There's several guys on the street. He's one of them looking for a job. And I'm sure his agent called the Niners, and the Niners said, we have no receiver positions available for Willie this summer. And Willie's probably pissed because he's like, well, who's getting those positions? And his agent's like Danny Gray and Tay Martin and Ronnie Bell. And he's like, well, what the fuck? I was activated over those guys last year. They couldn't lean on Tay Martin or Danny Gray or Ronnie Bell late in the year. They were leaning on me. And now here it is time for a roster spot, and they're going to give those guys a chance. This isn't about how good you are anymore. This is about something else. And I think it comes across as sour grapes. All I would say is, and I said this a couple times, but don't rip this guy so harshly. He's a great guy, and he's probably as respected as almost anybody in the room. I mean, he's that kind of a leader. He's really mature. He's really likable. He's a really cool guy. Just understand that there's some players, Conley, Snead, and probably a half dozen others around football, who once you become a veteran practice squad guy, everybody starts seeing you as a veteran practice squad guy, and it's hard to get an invite to camp, and it's hard to get a roster spot, and it's hard to get actually make the team. And I think that's kind of where he's at. I think he doesn't, the difference in finances, if you're been around the league as long as he has, if you're on the roster, you're making $1 million. If you're on the practice squad, you're making $207,000. Now it's not nothing. It's still $200,000 and you're playing football, but there's a big difference when you tell your wife, hey, honey, we're going to be making the league minimum. It's $1 million, or, we're going to be making $200,000. So, not that many people wouldn't die for $200,000. That's a very good salary in America. That would put you in a very wealthy 1% of Americans making $200,000. But you know what I'm saying? So I think he's just looking at this going, I'm frustrated. It's like, I did good by the Niners, and when they needed me, I was there for them. And now I need them. And, I'm persona non grata, and I got Pearsall now in front of me, and Cowing and Bell and Martin and, Danny Gray. And I'm better than some of those guys. I think that's the long and the short of it. He'll find a gig because he's good enough, but I do understand people being critical. I don't understand why he would say that, because the perception is bad. And the perception's like, well, wait a second. Are you better than Debo? No. Are you better than Ayuk? No. Are you better than JJ? No. You know what I mean? So that's where people are coming from, saying, hey, check yourself, Willie Snead. But I understand where he's coming from. Let's just say that.
Agreed.
Yeah. So back to the tight ends. Do they need another tight end? Like when they asked Shanahan about Latu, he's like, no, he hasn't been here. Usually guys have to practice first. Do you think, to me, I'll make another prediction. If this is the group of tight ends, George Kittle, Cam Latu, Braden Willis, Eric Saubert, Jake Tongues from Cal, and Mason Pline will be tight end 2. He will beat those guys out for tight end 2.
Whoa, that feels bold. I'm not going to.
Who do you like? Braden Willis didn't play at all this year. He's kind of built like a fullback.
That's my guy.
That's why he did get the gold helmet designation, so they do like him. Latu's a great athlete, but balls ricocheted off him last year. And then Tongues, I don't even know if Tongues is really an NFL player. He seems kind of like pure practice squad. And then there's Saubert, who's played a little. They tried to get the tight end out of Detroit. It didn't happen. People are saying, hey, go get Robert Tonyan. Might not be bad. But I think Pline's going to be tight end too. We'll see.
I wouldn't mind some Logan Thomas action. I've always been a fan of the former quarterback turned tight end. I think he'd just be a good veteran kind of pass catcher to have as a tight end too. But as of right now, I'm rolling with Braden Willis. I know he didn't play much, but I loved him in college. I mean, he's a smaller guy, but he's a physical blocker. What I love about Willis is he gives you everything he's got on every play. Like, he doesn't take a play off. I watched him go across the formation and crumble a defensive end, kind of similar to the Garendo clip. Like, Braden Willis,
he'll lay out to make catches too, like a wide receiver.
I like Braden Willis right now to be the tight end too. That being said, that's from looking at the limited options that the Niners have available. But I would like a free agent signing, a Robert Tonyan, a Logan Thomas. I think that makes a lot of sense. But if you're saying, hey, who's the tight end to as of right now, I'm rolling with Braden Willis. But back to your boy Mason Pline, because we talked pre-draft and you told me, you said, hey, check out Mason Pline. And while he didn't have a ton of catches at Furman, he's a guy. I saw the coach,
with Haberman,
head coach, he was talking about Pline. I think it was with Haberman. And he was saying, look, this guy keeps getting better and better. Like, he's learning the position. He's a basketball player who converted to tight end. And he's got a lot of potential. So I don't know about year one, but I'm intrigued. Like, if you were to ask me, like if John Lynch called me up and said, hey, baller, the cuts are getting down to the wire. Are we keeping Kamala too, or should we go Mason Pline? I'm rolling with Mason Pline and his upside.
Here, I'm going to share the screen. Hold on one second. I'm going to share the screen again here. See if I can do this. This is the coach on with Haberman, and this was a pretty good little soundbite here from Guy.
But I think the thing about him,
let's pause this. We'll bring it back to the front, and here it is.
Pro scouts ask me sometimes, Coach, do you see the basketball come out? Well, I knew what they were asking. And I said, no, I hadn't.
Is he soft? Is what they're asking. Is he soft?
Yeah, essentially. And I said, but I think the thing about him, his best days are clearly ahead of him. I was excited to see where he's going. I think that's a great fit for him. And I really have enjoyed watching them play. I just like to watch them play. And they do some pretty cool stuff. They run the ball. They use the tight ends, all those different things.
I saw him say he thinks he needs to be a better route runner. I don't know. Do you agree with that?
Well, yeah, I probably agree with that a little bit. He just hadn't played football that much. I think it's just the more he plays, the more he's doing just football. I don't think he's even close to maxing out what his abilities are.
Interesting. That's really it. I mean, the kid's he's raw. He's a raw prospect. But I literally didn't. I've only seen him run a few patterns myself. But to me, once I saw the Aaron Gordon above the rim, reverse jams and leaning in and tomahawk one-handers, that's plenty athleticism. I've watched enough of him playing basketball to know that this is an athlete. George Kittle is an athlete. George Kittle can't get out there on the basketball floor and rip one-handers and catch alley-oop jams and, reverse it on the break and stuff like that. If you watch this kid's Ferris State basketball film, this kid's got all the athleticism you need. So then it's just a matter of, well, how tough is he? And that's why NFL scouts are asking the coach, does the basketball in him come out? In other words, is this guy soft as Charmin? And then the 10.5-inch mitts, that's big. But to me, the big one is the mechanical engineering major, because that means you're insanely smart. And I think that was what was going on with Latou last year. I'm not saying Latou's not smart, but I think Latou was just overwhelmed by all of that he had to digest mentally. I expect Latou, baller, to show up in camp this year and be quite a bit better because I just think that I saw a guy last year that was thinking. He was thinking about everything. And then balls were ricocheting off him. He must have dropped a dozen passes. He's one of the worst looking tight end receivers I think I've ever seen. And I'm sitting there going, they took this guy in the third freaking round? No way. But then the more I watched him, the more I thought, you know what? This guy's just not adjusting. It's too many variables. It's too many things to think about. Redshirt him for the year, put him on the IR, let him lift, let him learn the system, dust him off in minicamp, see what he's got next summer. I expect Latu to be quite a bit better. In fact, if you said to me who will be their 3 tight ends, I would guess it would be Latu and Pline and Kittle. But who knows? Who knows? So we'll see. I mean, he's gonna have to be a whole lot better than he was last summer because he was atrocious last summer.
But the dropsies not only showed up in training camp that you saw, but they were there at Alabama too. Like he dropped a lot of balls even in college. Well, started out at DN, then he went to tight end. I don't think he's a natural. Like I already said it. I prefer Braden Willis to him, but to put a bow on Mason Pline, hey, we've seen the basketball player turned tight end a few times, and it's worked out really well, right? Antonio Gates, Jimmy Graham, Tony Gonzalez, like that's
how about the guy for Denver? Wasn't his name Thomas? Who was the receiver? I think he was at Portland.
Julian Thomas.
Was it Julian Thomas? They had a guy named Thomas who was the receiver.
I know you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean,
Peyton.
I'll say this:
touchdowns with Peyton.
If I were an NFL scout or general manager, and I had an army full of lieutenants and road scouts and guys who worked for me, I would take one guy and say, hey, your special project for the year is to go find me a basketball player who can convert to football. Why? Because there's so many awesome athletes dreaming the NBA dream. And we all know that it's almost impossible to make the NBA. So what do? You're some 6'8", incredible athlete, but you're kind of a bricklayer. You don't have much of a shot. You're kind of yoked up, but you don't quite have a role. You're not quite big enough to be a 5. You don't have the face the basket game. You don't have the handle, and suddenly you can't make it in the NBA. Well, what do? You're a 6'8" great athlete. Find me. I'm not saying that DJ. Who remember that guy for NC State who went to the Final Four? DJ Burns. Yeah. A lot of people thought he's too soft. I mean, as far as I don't mean he's a soft guy, but he's too soft-bodied to play football, right? He's too fatty and not nearly muscular enough and not nearly athletic enough. He's got too much body fat. He would have to really trim down to be an NFL player. But tons of people were asking the question, hey, is this guy going to play in the NFL? Blah, 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 blah. Well, he's not necessarily a good candidate, but guess what? There's all kinds of 6'8", 6'6", 6'7", 6'8", great athletes who are on all 3 levels, Division 1, 2, and 3, who aren't going to play in the NBA, maybe won't pursue a career in Europe, and might be good candidates. If I was an NFL general manager, I'd find one guy on my staff and just go, I want you to go through every basketball player in the country and find me a conversion tight end or defensive end, or you know what I mean? Because there's just so many great athletes in the NBA.
You don't got to convince me of this. I've been saying this actually for years. I want a 6'10" red zone threat where, I know this guy might not have the most expandable role because, guys will be diving at their ankles and, diving at their knees. But I think there's some legitimacy to a 6'10" red zone threat. Not only that, imagine him blocking field goals. Like, how many times have they zoomed in after the kick and someone gets a fingernail on it? You're telling me now you got a 7-footer with a 7'3" wingspan trying to block that kick? Like, I think there's a role for it. So
are you telling me a young Tom Tolbert couldn't have played tight end in the NFL? I bet she could, man. I bet she could. Now, you don't make
Larry,
as much money.
Next time you're at the facility, let John Lynch know that I'm willing to be that basketball scout. Say, hey, Bay Area Baller is willing to, tell him I'll take a 10% discount just to get my foot in the door, and I'll be the basketball scout. for the football team and say, okay, who can make this transition from basketball to football? Let Johnny know I'm that guy.
It's been done before. Heck, the Eagles just signed a guy from Australia who they think is a great offensive lineman. Jordan Mailata was not an offensive lineman. He was a guy they found. So it's I'm not saying invest high picks in these guys, but as far as if you could find an athlete, you're only talking about, hey, he doesn't have to be a dominating inline blocker. You could flex him out. But I love this kid playing, and we'll see what it looks like. All right, let's get to the offensive line. Did the Niners blow the draft by not going offensive line either early enough or just, enough? They wound up with Dominic Pooney out of Kansas, who some people think can play tackle, but most people think he's a guard, and I think he's a guard. Then they got Jarrett Kingston. I really didn't like that pick in the 6th round because I just felt there were better guys out there, but then Todd Husak, who's former voice for the Stanford Cardinal, says he really likes Kingston. And Kingston did put up a lot of reps at 225. He's enormously strong. 36 reps. He definitely has good movement skills. Then they also signed after the draft 2 pretty interesting guys. Drake Nugent, who was a 3-year captain at Stanford, who transferred this year to Michigan. They won the national championship. He was first-team All-Big Ten at center, though he did get owned by Michael Hall in the Ohio State game. And then there's Bryson Mays, who played at Southern Miss, and he's really intriguing. Like when you start watching him move around, he's got kind of a lean upper body, but he's got a lot of weight in his legs and in his thighs and calves, big lower body, but real nasty and really athletic. They went with 4 relatively athletic players who all either project to center or guard. And really, they just need a couple of them to maybe stick, and it probably won't be a bad draft. I've heard people say that Nugent is a sleeper. I've seen people say that Pooney could be a starter. Kingston kind of looks like a tough guy to me, and Mays looks like he's got just the perfect build to be a developmental offensive lineman. I don't know. I haven't studied any of them extensively. What'd you think of what the Niners did on the offensive line? No tackles. So they're going into this year again with Colton McKivitz, Trent Williams, and Jalen Moore as their 3 offensive tackles on the roster. They did also bring in Brandon Parker, who's kind of a journeyman who's been around the league. Big 6'8" guy, played with the Raiders. He's there this year's Matt Pryor, I guess. But Lynch said it. Trent Williams is the starter at left tackle. McKivitz is the starter at right tackle, and Jalen Moore is the swing tackle. Are they okay on the O-line? What'd you think about what they did there?
Well, there were no tackles to draft at 31. I thought there were a couple reaches even ahead of pick 31 when you're looking at Jordan Morgan. Like when the Packers took him, I was like, yeah, get him off the board. Let another guy fall. Tyler Guyton, when the Cowboys took him, I was like, okay, thank God we're not ending up with Guyton. I did not like those 2 players. There wasn't a good tackle available at 31.
I agree.
Could they have, they would have had to trade it up like 10 to 15 spots to maybe get Fautanu.
They obviously didn't love Kingsley Maua Teia.
I didn't like him either. So
he wasn't much of a run blocker.
I thought Kingsley's feet work, it looked clunky. I didn't think he had smooth feet. I didn't like the way he moved with his fluidity. So I
didn't like Tyler Guyton who went to Dallas. I thought he looked like he didn't play hard. He rose up out of his stance. You could see his head. He had the measurables, and people, Tyler Guyton, he looks great. But when you watch the film, there wasn't greatness on that film.
No. But let's get to Pooney, the guy that they actually picked. This guy gave up 0 sacks in the last 2 years. When you put on the Pooney tape, the first thing that stands out is this dude's got a wide body. Like he's kind of got that Aaron Banks frame where it's wide. Like if you were to beat Pooney, you got to take the long route to get around this dude because he's got a thick build. He's strong. He got
versatile. You can play all the spots.
He played tackle. I think, like you said, I see him as a guard. He had a 90.4 pass grade per PFF, and that aligned with what I was seeing in pass protection. He's just a really good pass blocker. It was either his 3-cone or shuttle, I can't remember, were like outstanding. So he's huge, but he's got some nimbleness to him. Like the Pooney pick, I really like. That's one of my favorite picks in this draft. Because the player is just really good. He could be the guy, if you were to ask me, who could start. You said Mustafa, and I do see that with Hufanga coming off the injury. But the other guy, is Pooney that I'm looking at. I think Pooney could potentially battle for the right guard. I think Feliciano might be the leader in the clubhouse at that position. But, we're always one injury away, right? Whether, something happens to Brendel and then Feliciano's got to go to center. I could see Pooney filling in our right guard. I really like the physicality. Just watching the tape, 0 sacks he gave up in 2 years, Larry.
I mean, that's great. I love the nastiness too. And he seemed really happy in the interview to be a 49er. To me, he looks like he could be a really nice road grading guard. He seems like he's really aggressive and tough. And, there were a couple different guys that I talked to who said, man, this guy, you can see some of the nastiness that he plays with. And I like that. To me, it's like, I like somebody who's looking to bury. I like an offensive lineman that's looking to bury somebody. And maybe he's the guy. It would be great. It would give the offensive line a shot in the arm if this guy could start at right guard and be somewhat of a force, especially in the run game. So that's an interesting one. The other one is they didn't go D-line at all. I mean, at all. They took Evan Anderson late, and we'll talk about him because he's super intriguing. But the starting line is probably going to be Nick Bosa, Javon Hargrave coming off of a year that was, to me, hugely disappointing. And then Leonard Floyd on the outside opposite Bosa. And then I think probably Malik Collins, but it could be Jordan Elliott. I kind of like both those signings, to be honest. Collins was enormously strong coming out of Nebraska. I mean, he's just crazy strong. And then I've always loved Elliott's footwork, and he had a really good PFF grade last year against the run. So, and then, then they got a whole nother line of Yatir Gross-Matos, Kevin Givens, Drake Jackson, Robert Beal, Kalia Davis, T.Y. McGill. And then they got a whole, 3 or 4 other guys, really maybe 5 or 6 other guys behind those guys. Austin Bryant, Wagee, Alex Barrett, Ernest Brown, Raymond Johnson III. And then they signed this kid, Evan Anderson. What do you think? I'll throw you the same question I've been kind of throwing out to people. Is the Niner D-line better, the same, or worse than it was on Super Bowl Sunday?
Yeah, that's tough. I'm going to say maybe ever so slightly worse. Ever so slight downgrade. Losing Armstead. Randy Gregory. While I was kind of disappointed with Gregory, I think he's a solid player. I think Gregory does some good things out there. Chase Young, he had some moments. So I'm going to say ever so slightly downgrade. You could talk me into a wash. That being said, probably the guy I'm most excited about on the interior is Malik Collins. I mean, he had 5 sacks last year with the Texans. And when you watch the tape, this dude's got some moves on the end. Like, he's quick. He's got some pass rush moves. He can get after the quarterback. So I think you're right. Jordan Elliott on base downs, Malik Collins on passing downs, sprinkle in Kevin Givens, because that's just what the Niners have done with Kevin Givens the last few years. But Malik Collins is the guy I'm most excited about because, well, it was refreshing. When I put on that Texans tape, he's a big boy, but he's got some quickness and he's got those pass rush moves.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, the only thing about Eric Armstead, I like Eric Armstead. And do I think Eric Armstead's better than the guys they signed? Yeah. But Eric Armstead's got chronic knee problems, chronic plantar fasciitis. It's not getting better. It's not like you say. I've never met anybody who said, "Man, I used to have plantar fasciitis." Right? I mean, it's like once you get it, it's like an affliction. You just have it forever, especially if you're 6'7", 300 pounds. So I don't. He wasn't going to be healthier in the future, and his price tag was exorbitant. I know that he wanted to be a Niner for 10 years. I know they're losing a very respected leader in the room. But I would take, if you ask me, if we're in a planning meeting, you said, hey, Krug, we can either pay Armstead or we can get Collins and Jordan Elliott. Which would you rather go for? I'd go with Collins and Jordan Elliott. Younger, healthier, extra guy. I think they made the right move there. And I love the Leonard Floyd edition. He's way better than Chase Young. He's way better than Randy Gregory. So I do like those guys. I need Hargrave to play like Hargrave played in Pittsburgh and Philly. He hasn't. To me, Hargrave is the big question mark. I mean, is all he had last? Did we see everything he had last year? And then is Drake Jackson going to do anything? Is Robert Beal going to do anything? Those are big questions. But the guy who's the most interesting is the guy that they signed as an undrafted free agent. So let's talk about him for a second. Evan Anderson. The Niners gave this guy $280,000, $30,000 to sign, $250,000 guaranteed. Almost $300,000 guaranteed to Evan Anderson. They wanted this guy bad. Now, he had a big weight problem. He was 360, but he's lost some of that weight. He's down to 320. He played at Florida Atlantic. And if you watch this guy, you can see the strength. I mean, this guy will split double teams. He's not much of a pass rusher. He doesn't have a lot of quickness, but he sure looked a lot quicker at 320 than he did at 360. That's for sure. What do you think? Did you watch any of Evan Anderson and any of his footage? Because if you're paying a guy $300,000 almost guaranteed to get him to come to your place, he's got a great chance to make the team or at least the practice squad.
I did check out some Evan Anderson, and what I'll say is this dude's a really good run defender. I saw him take on multiple double teams where, most of these guys, Givens against a double team, he's getting washed out. Kinlaw, he might get pushed to the third level, but Evan Anderson was holding up to these. He wasn't moving. He was not moving. This dude's great against the run. He'll hold the point of attack, which I think the Niners need one of those guys. I feel like philosophically they don't typically like two-down players, like two-down run stuffers.
They want to get up the field in the wide nine and heat up the quarterback and speed him up.
So this kind of feels like a contrast to what they typically do on the interior, but I like having one of these guys. Like I like having a big boy, a 320-pounder in the middle to clog up. This guy's a two-gapper. He can clog up two gaps. So he's a great run defender. He did have 5 sacks this past year.
Which is a ton.
Which is a lot. And it's not like – and his sacks come with pure strength, right? He's not the most technical pass rusher, but, he's big, he's strong. Where I think the Niners could utilize him is against the run, because we know this rush defense, it took a slip last year. Like, it fell a few spots in the rankings. So maybe Evan Anderson and this guaranteed money tells you, obviously, they like something about him. That being said, there's a reason he went undrafted, right? The arm length isn't there. The arms were shorter than I expected. But that being said, this guy's a good run defender. I think there's a spot for him potentially for that role on this team.
How about the linebacker spot? We haven't really talked about the linebacker spot. When do you think Greenlaw's coming back? You think Greenlaw would be back? You think he's pup list? Do you think he's back in week 6, week 7? Do you think it's going to be longer, shorter? You think they give him the whole year? I mean, he did blow this is where, it's almost like you got to check in with modern medicine. This guy blew out his Achilles in the Super Bowl. In the past, he would have been out for all of next year for sure. But now that everybody, the surgeries are being perfected, everything, it's amazing, the turnaround. What do you think the Niners can expect to get out of Greenlaw?
Greenlaw's a warrior. I mean, he's probably going to be back week 6, week 8. That's where I ballpark it. But Larry, my concern is he might not be the same player. I'm just being honest, right?
Yeah.
The Achilles, that's a tough one to come back from. Like you look at,
especially you're a linebacker that has to drop and then drive. You get good depth on your drop, and then you have to drive explosely forward. Yes. Seems like it just really plays into
that is
your Achilles.
Yes. So is he going to play this year? I think he will because he's a warrior. But is he going to be that same player? I'm not sure. It's just it's just seeing Achilles injuries. J.K. Dobbins hasn't looked like the same player. Like Klay Thompson, if you want to go the basketball route, he could never move quite the same. So. We'll see. Dre Greenlaw is going to play. Is he going to be the same guy? I hope so. But hey, we might be getting a look at some of these second-year players like a Jalen Graham, like a D. Winters, Devondre Campbell. Man, I really liked Devondre Campbell like 5 years ago when he was with the Falcons, or his first couple years with the Packers. Like, I think he's been – he's an aging vet. They slow down a little bit once they get into their 30s. So Campbell, while I do I like the move because I feel like it's a safe move. I think he's pretty good in pass coverage, yet he's a solid run defender. I mean, he had a whole bunch of tackles for the Packers like 2 years ago, I believe. So we can get some of that back. Like it's a nice safe move to bring in Campbell. I do want that veteran in the room, along with D. Winters, along with Jalen Graham. We didn't talk about Tatum Bethune yet, but Bethune is just like, and why don't we right now? Bethune is what these scouts and, these defensive coaches like in their linebackers. He's got a quick trigger to get downhill. He can play sideline to sideline. He had 11 sacks in his college career. Like I saw Tatum Bethune, you can blitz him. He's got good timing. So Bethune, if you were to ask me, do I think he's going to make the team? Probably not, because I think I like Jalen Graham, D. Winters a little bit more, and I've seen them, whether it's the preseason, I've seen them a bit more. But this linebacker room, I'm a little concerned with Dre Greenlaw. Is he going to be the same guy? Devondre seems like a patch job, but really I'm looking at Jalen Graham, D. Winters. Can one of these guys step up and kind of be that next linebacker for this 49ers defense?
Okay, assuming Greenlaw starts on the PUP list, so you got Warner, Campbell, D. Winters, Jalen Graham, Tatum Bethune. So that's 5 linebackers right there. They usually keep 6. I would say Flanagan fouls, Curtis Robinson, and the guy they signed from Arizona, who's an undersized guy, Ezekiel Turner. I would say those 3 special team linebackers battle for one spot, and they go with Winters, Graham, Bethune, Warner, Campbell, and then one of those 3 guys. I personally think, I asked Steve Wilkes late in the year, I said, Steve, I love Jalen Graham in the preseason. He looked like a house on fire. How come we're not seeing him late in the year? And he's like, giving me this story about how Jalen was a hybrid safety linebacker, and so he's a little bit behind Winters and this and that. But the guy that I saw in the preseason was flying all over the field and looking like the kind of guy that could pile up 15 tackles in a game. So, Winters, I expect to be quite a bit better because he was like 10%, 10th percentile of vertical. I think he only had like a 28 or a 30-inch vertical coming out. So he didn't have a lot of lower body explosion. And I think he will be better this year. But Graham is the guy that I think takes it to a totally different level. And my prediction is that the Niners, who run they essentially run a 4-2-5, right? They go with 4 up front, they rush 4, they go with 2 stack backers, and then it's kind of a 5-man secondary. I would say that the 2 and the 4-2-5 are going to be Warner and Graham. That would be my guess. Yeah, I know Campbell was paid the money, and I know Winters is there and played more this year. But if you say to me, bet on it, I would say it'll be Warner and Graham as your starters, and then Campbell, Winters, Bethune, and one of the other three special team guys to round it out. That's kind of how I see it, at least until Greenlaw gets back in week 6 or 8 or 10 or whatever week it is.
Yeah, I'll go with the chalk. I'll go with the chalk, and I'm going to say it's going to be Campbell that's going to be lining up next to Fred Warner early in the season.
Nice. We've got
Moonman.
Moonman
dropped $2. He said, "What are 13's?" That's Brock Purdy. What are Brock Purdy's expectations this year? Deep ball legs. What are 13's expectations this year? Deep ball legs. Maybe he's legit. I don't know. I think he's talking about Brock Purdy and his deep ball.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think Brock Purdy, you can kind of see is working on his body. I think he's going to be more explosive, more sudden, stronger, and I think he's also going to benefit from all those reps, that he's getting with his receivers. So, I mean, there's no question Brock Purdy's going to get better. I thought one of the most absurd points that the pro Trey Lance crowd was making last summer was that Brock can't get any better. It's like, what? Why? Because you said so? I mean, so show me a second-year player that doesn't get better. All second-year players get way, way better. And he was way better, even despite the elbow injury in year 2 than year 1. I expect him to be a little bit better this year. I think he'll have a little bit more arm strength. He'll have a little bit better understanding of NFL defenses. He'll have a little bit better understanding of the Niners offense, and he'll have a little bit better rapport with all of his weapons. So I think, I've said it many times. People are tired of me saying it, but I mean, Brock's legit, and he's going to continue to improve.
I can't wait to see what Brock's going to do. I mean, last year he didn't even have an off season. So I think he's going to come in this year. We've already seen some pictures circulating. He does look a little bit thicker, a little stronger. So Brock, I'm excited to see what he's going to do this year. I agree with you, Larry. It's up from here.
So what have we not hit that you want to hit before we bail out here, Baller? We've been going here for almost an hour, hour 45, something like hour 47, something like that, or is that an hour and 57? Not sure how long.
Yeah, well, you know what? I got the depth chart pulled up here, and I want to ask you, the D tackle rotation, which one of these guys do you think isn't going to? I think we can agree Malik Collins, Javon Hargrave, Jordan Elliott, Kevin Givens. I think those 4 are locks. But, do you see anything from a T.Y. McGill, a Kalia Davis, a Spencer Wagee? Which of those guys do you think would be ready to contribute this year?
Spencer, I know, his downside, the downside for Wagee was that he just spent too much time on the ground, and that's what happens when you can't make plays if you can't keep your feet. So he's got to do a better job of playing the game on his feet and not going to the ground. So that's his challenge. Kalia Davis has got a lot of talent, but it just hasn't happened yet. And I'm not sure why. McGill is more of a veteran who's a one-gap penetrator, who's solid and smart and dependable, but not tons of upside. I could see them going with obviously Hargrave and Collins, Givens and Elliott, and then maybe McGill and Evan Anderson. Yeah, and we'll see. I mean, I know Wagee is going to work at it. He's country boy strong. He grew up on a farm in North Dakota, and he's really, really got a great motor, and he's a hard worker, and he's plays incredibly hard. We'll see what kind of work he did in the off season. I mean, I'll have a much better idea when I see these guys coming up here in the mini camp of whose body looks different, who looks more explosive, who's put in the work. But Kalia Davis has really natural gifts. He's very fast. He's 295 pounds. He was an inside linebacker who's kind of kept getting bigger. He's got great movement ability, but he doesn't anchor that well. McGill as I said, one gap penetrator. Not really, can't really absorb blocks, but he's going to be in the right place at the right time, doing the right thing. And then there's Waggy, who's, real tough kid who wants it and probably worked on his technique quite a bit. I expect him to improve quite a bit because he was in year 1. Now he's in year 2. And then there's Evan Anderson, who, as we said, has enormous strength, is maybe their only 2-gapper now that Kinlaw's gone. And, if you say who are the run stuffers on this team, it's probably Collins, Elliott, and Anderson. Those are probably the best guys against the run inside. So, but that's probably, I would probably give Evan Anderson the slight nod over Kalia Davis, and I'd probably give McGill the slight nod over Waggy. But that's just, what I suspect. If I get out there and, Waggy played at about 285, 290, if he's suddenly 310, but he looks incredible, or, I would expect the improvement curve is going to favor Waggy over Kalia and McGill and Evan Anderson. Evan Anderson will be in his first camp, just trying to figure things out. Waggy will have improved the most. McGill is probably the safest guy who you're going to get what you're going to get out of him. And then Kalia Davis is kind of a wild card. I would say Kalia Davis, Robert Beal, Drake Jackson are kind of the 3 wild cards on this defensive line. Because, Drake has got a lot of talent, but it just hasn't happened for him. He hasn't been able to be he lacks functional strength and he lacks moves. And then Beal has an incredible burst off the edge, but he lacks some counter moves, though he did improve quite a bit late in the year if you talk to Chris Kosaric. And then Kalia Davis is just, big, strong, fast, athletic, and it's just a matter of, can that knee stay healthy, and can he be productive? So those are the wild cards for sure. Jackson and Beal and Kalia Davis, and I guess I would throw Waggy in there as well. I'll tell you the other guy to kind of keep your eye on a lesser note is the kid from Maryland, Sam. I think his name's Okinanu.
Fill me in. I don't know much about Sam.
Yeah, he's a short, powerful, 275-pound defensive end who's got great athleticism and bend and explosion. And the Niners signed him late in the year, and I talked to him in the locker room a couple times, and he was really excited to be part of their offseason program. And he doesn't have long levers, and he doesn't have he doesn't have that kind of long linear defensive end build. He's more built like an interior player, but he plays defensive end. But the athleticism is really off the charts. So you're talking about a guy who's really, really, really athletic, though he's kind of a compact 275 defensive end. So he's just a name to watch for because I have a feeling that athleticism in this scheme, getting up the field, could be a good fit.
No doubt. I'm going to keep my eye on Sam. Hey, I think the only draft pick we didn't hit on, and shout out to the chat because they let us know. Hey, chat's been live. We appreciate that. But Renardo Green, I think Renardo Green was the only guy we didn't hit on. And we did a pre-draft show, and we discussed Renardo Green. And both of us liked him. I told you, hey, man, when I was watching the tape, I put a star by his name. That being said, I didn't think he was going to go in the second round. But I liked the player. Why do I like the player? He's sticky in coverage, right? His ability to mirror the receiver's cuts and routes I thought were awesome. And, PFF agrees. They gave him a 90 grade in man coverage. Another fifth-year senior. He's played some safety, and you see that because he's a willing tackler. My only concern is that I feel like he's a bit handsy, Larry, and I got this stat from Al Sacco, 11 penalties the last 2 years on Renardo Green. with including 4 pass interferences this past season. He's just so competitive, Larry. Like when I was watching Bernardo Green, he is so freaking competitive that he does not want his receiver to catch a ball. And sometimes that leads to maybe just a grab or a tug, or he's a little too handsy. But I like how competitive he is. I like how sticky he is. But he's kind of got some of that Ambry in his game where he's a little too handsy. But I want to hear how you feel about Renardo.
Well, I did identify this guy a couple months ago as a guy that I really liked. I thought I kept grabbing him in the mock drafts because almost all the mock drafts I did had him in the 5th round. And I kind of thought of him as like a 3rd round guy. So when I kept seeing him in the 5th round, I'm like, oh, that's a good corner. Take that guy in the 5th round. They actually took him in the 2nd round, late 2nd round. Only thing I didn't like is down the field. He had at least 2, maybe 3 penalties that I saw where he was just clearly face guarding. He's running with the receiver down the field and the ball shows up and he, puts his hands up, but he never gets his head turned and they just throw the flag. So, that's, that you get that flag every time in the NFL. You got to turn your head. If you turn your head, they give you all kinds of, liberties to make plays in the ball and get handsy and, have some hand fighting and that kind of thing. If you don't turn your head, it's just face guarding and it's an easy call for them to make. They're just like, you just ran up the receiver's back. You never saw the ball. You know what I mean? Especially if you make any contact at all. I mean, we've seen it. So I think he's got a tendency to face guard a little bit, but I'll say this, man, I'd much rather have the over aggressive corner than the under aggressive corner. This guy's, to me, when the Niners lost Ward and they lost Mosley, they lost true alphas. They lost a safety and they lost a corner and they lost 2 really good run defenders, but they also lost 2 of the toughest guys they had in their secondary. Mosley was awesome against the run. Jimmy Ward was like a linebacker. He hit so hard. They lost both those guys, and I thought that was a major reason they were so soft against the run. And then when you went into their room, I mean, Jair is a great young player. Hafanga's a terrific player, but there's a lot of nice guys there. They missed that kind of the guy who would just cut you, the guy who just literally would rather cut you for blood than lose to you. And I think they in Mustafa and Green, they got a couple of true alphas. And I think Green he could be their answer at the slot and move Lenore outside. He could be the answer outside and leave Lenore in the slot. He could be the answer at free safety. He's only 185 pounds, so people are like, well, he's a little weak, but there's nothing about his game that plays weak at all. He shows up to hit. He loves to hit. This is a guy who really wants to start you. So I liked him. I liked him a lot. There were a lot of corners like Philly took, or was it Philly? No, who took Wiggins?
Baltimore. Pick in front of us. I love Wiggins.
Now Wiggins is incredibly fast. Incredibly fast. But Wiggins, he's soft. He is soft. He's a small 164-pound guy with a tiny little waist who won't come up and hit. He's great in coverage, but he's not a tackler. He's not a hitter. He's not going to be a run player at all. This guy, on the other hand, doesn't have that kind of 40 time and doesn't have that kind of long speed, but he's way, way, way more of a factor against the run. And that's a big part of it. So
it's a requirement, Larry.
Yeah, you got to be able to play the run.
Requires you to tackle at the cornerback position. Like when I'm watching these Niners corners, Charvarius Ward, Demo, like these guys will hit you. But that doesn't go for all the teams in the NFL, right? Some of these corners aren't interested in tackling. They'll just stay blocked because, hey, I'm gonna let my linebacker, I'm gonna let my DN clean it up. But no, here on the Niners, it's a requirement. Like you see Charvarius Ward stick his nose in there. And
Lenore, remember the hit that Lenore had on Swift in the Eagle game?
He crumbled him like Demo, and that goes back to him at Oregon. Like Demo's always been a physical player. And that's why when we drafted him, kind of with the size and the physicality profile, I was saying from the start, I was like, man, I think Demo profiles as a really good slot, kind of similarly to what they had with K'Wan Williams. You can blitz him, he's physical in the run. So absolutely. But whereas some teams covet that, the stickiness of a corner, on the Niners, yeah, we want our corners to be sticky, but you have to be willing to stick your nose in there in the run defense.
I mean, you think of the Niners against the run. One of the reasons they were so good against the run is Emmanuel Mosley would come up and just everything he had, he would just hurl his body at whoever was coming off the edge. So, of the defense in the run game. So they lost a lot with Mosley. I know everybody talked about Chase Young. He's not setting the edge. And they missed Ebukam, who was really good at setting the edge. But the three guys they really missed, let's be totally honest about it, in the run game. It was Mosley off the edge at corner. It was Jimmy Ward, and it was Azeez Al-Shaair. Those were the three guys that and maybe Ridgeway to some degree inside, but they missed DJ Jones from years back. But really from 2 years ago to last year, the big difference is no Jimmy Ward, no Emmanuel Mosley, no Azeez Al-Shaair. So I like Bernardo Green. And also I loved his reaction. I don't know if you saw the reaction when he got drafted. He didn't celebrate. He just was like matter of fact. He told Lynch and Shanahan he was a dog like 15 times. And, Florida State, they got a lot of great athletes on their defense. And he really stood out as a hitter. So I really like him. I think Bernardo Green is gonna play on the corner. He lacks a little bit of long speed, but I think he's going to be a really solid corner for them. I really do.
No doubt.
All right, man. Well, hey, good stuff. We're, about 2 hours into our stream. We probably could cut it right here. And any final thoughts before we bolt for the door? When are you streaming again?
Hey, I'm going to be live probably either Friday or, Mondays. I got a show with my buddies straight out of the Bay. So that'll be kicking in to gear here, full throttle. So hey, make sure you come check me out. The YouTube name's right here on the screen, Bay Area Baller. I love breaking down the game, but I like watching the film, and sometimes I'll bring in some film, right? Because that's what it's about, Larry. You're a film guy. It all goes back to the film, So I like kind of providing that analysis along with my opinion, kind of in combination. So, it's the off season. It's a fun time of the year. Hey, but last question I got for you before we wrap it up. What are a couple things you're going to be looking for at rookie minicamp?
I'm definitely, well, first of all, you always look for, who without looking for anything, you're looking for who stands out, right? Like, who am I? I don't want to be looking for somebody. I want someone to shine and kind of make a name for themselves. So the very first thing is don't look for anybody. Let them kind of show themselves and figure out, you know what I mean? Don't go in there expecting to see one thing. Kind of let it all come to you and see what shines to you. I'm going to be looking for Cody Schrader and Guerendo just to see what they look like side by side and in the short area. Does Guerendo, we know he's straight line fast over 40 yards. Is he quick? And then is Cody Schrader have the kind of decisive cutting ability that I think he must have to have the kind of year he just had in the SEC? So I'm looking for those guys for sure. And then what else am I going to look for? I think I'm going to be looking for Tatum Bethune to just see, the Niners have done such an amazing job at identifying linebackers. I mean, think about it. Greenlaw, round 5, Warner, round 3, Azeez Al-Shaair, undrafted, Jalen Graham, round 6, D. Winters was late. They're so good at finding linebackers who fit their scheme. Johnny Holland does such a great job. And I'm interested to see Bethune because, you watch Bethune in Florida State's system, and there's no doubt he's a great athlete, and he's around the ball a lot. And yeah, he's 5'11" and not 6'1" or 6'2". And if he were 6'1" or 6'2", he probably would have gone 2-3 rounds earlier. But to me, there's not a big difference between. I mean, I think a Dexter Coakley or the late Sam Mills or even Mike Singletary. If you're a great linebacker with speed and strength and instincts, Derek Brooks was 6 feet and change. He wasn't some monster. He's in Canton. You know, Mike Singletary was maybe 6 feet.
Zach Thomas wasn't very big, and he wasn't very fast either.
Zach Thomas, not very big. I mean, you think of some of these guys that are some great linebackers. Devin White is maybe 6 feet. You know, he's not really big. So to me, height is one of the athleticism that you need to have on the second level in the NFL these days is extraordinary. Like it used to be, you know, the linebackers in the NFL were Matt Millen, and they ran 4.9, and they had the big neck roll.
Ray
right?
Nitschke.
Yeah, I mean, these guys were slow, really, really, really slow. And then all of a sudden it was like, hey, man, you got to have at least 4.7 speed or you can't play linebacker. Now it's like you got to have 4.5 speed or you're not playing. Now, this guy I think is more like 4.6 speed, but he's got great instincts. And he's only 5'11"
than that. Yeah.
He was around the ball all the time at Florida State, and he looked punny fast. So I'm really eager to see Bethune and Graham and Winters and just what those linebackers look like and who really stands out, because Bethune is a great athlete. And I don't care if he's 5'11". I don't think it matters at all. He's 5'11", 235, 240. It's all about, can he cover? How well does he run? What kind of instincts does he have? So I'm not going to be looking at those linebackers, the rookies and also the second year guys to see, is there a Greenlaw in this bunch? Is there a Warner in this bunch? Is there somebody who, I mean, because I think Jalen Graham could be like a Greenlaw, you know, or like a Warner. I mean, he was really young last year, but he's really athletic and really instinctive. So he's flowing in the right direction. And then he's also got this foot speed and explosiveness. I mean, I think he had like 11 or 12 tackles in one of the preseason games, didn't he? Pretty sure he did. So I really like Jalen Graham, and I'm eager to see what Winters and Bethune look like. So I'll definitely be looking for those linebackers. And then Jacob Cowing. You know, I really think Jacob Cowing is going to be a difference maker. Because think about it. You got these big physical receivers that run across the middle of the field like they own it. And now you add this super explosive 4.3 awesome little route runner who had crazy collegiate production. He could be wide freaking open on this team. And if Jacob Cowing's wide freaking open, the Niners are going to be quite a bit better than they've been in the past. I think that's a major addition to the team.
It's going to be a huge contrast in slot receivers, right? You got Juwan Jennings, 6'4", he's huge, he's physical, he's a big slot. But on third down, you could also or at any time, you could bring in little Jacob Cowing, who's a jitterbug, who will make you miss. He's a nasty route runner, creates separation. So it's like you got a new element, you got a new wrinkle to this Kyle Shanahan offense. It's going to be fun to see how that slot plays out.
And let's be honest. I mean, you know me, man. I'm going to be all over watching Tanner Mordecai because I think I see a player that can beat out Brandon Allen, and I like him. I like him a lot. So we'll see. We'll see. And then you never know. You never know too. They always have guys who try out who aren't signed. I'm eager to see what Evan Anderson looks like and how he moves, because the guy that I saw in film, to be frank, way too slow to play in the NFL. Like way too slow. Like he doesn't come off blocks. He's just slow.
He holds his ground, but yeah, he's not giving you that extra juice.
And a guy who I know who scouts in Florida, who's a buddy of mine, and he said, "What do you think of Evan Anderson?" I said, "Way, way too slow." And he goes, "You know what? You probably saw." So he said, "Send me what you're looking at." So I sent him what I'm looking at, and he's like, "Krug, that's when he was 360. He's down to 320. And he's got great movement ability at 320. And I said, okay. I go, do you have any film of it? And he's like, well, I don't have any film I could show you at 320, but I think the guy that you see in this summer is going to look a lot quicker than that. So I'm looking for that as well. I'm looking for Evan Anderson because they gave him almost $400,000 guaranteed, and they didn't add anything to their defensive line, and they really did need to add a two-gapper. And this guy's a two-gapper, and if he's 320 and moving really well at 320, maybe he could be a real sleeper. I mean, if they get a run-stuffing two-gapper who's got a little bit of quickness, because the 5.5 sacks is a pretty good number for a two-gap tackle at any level. So, I mean, if this guy's got quickness and he's that strong as he appears to be, where he can split doubles and play the run, that will be a significant addition, despite the fact that they didn't utilize a draft pick on him. So I'll be taking a look at him as well. All right, brother, good stuff. As far as me tomorrow, check me out in the morning, or check me. Let's see, tomorrow. What am I doing tomorrow? Oh, tomorrow's Tuesday, so I'm doing a live stream with Grant at 2:30. So we'll chop it up tomorrow at 2:30, and then I'm going live tomorrow night after the Giants-Rockies game. Ned Colletti's going to be in the house, and we're going to talk a little bit about Brian Sabian, who I think was honored tonight at the Bay Area. I think he's a Bay Area Sports Hall of Fame. So Ned's going to be on for about an hour tomorrow night around 8:30. We'll go live tomorrow, and me and Danny will talk a little baseball with Ned Colletti.
Hey, I played with Sabe's kid, by the way.
Did you?
I mean, baseball was my thing growing up. Yeah, Sean Sabian, obviously Bay Area kid, but yeah, we played travel ball together. I remember we went to Florida. Right, I thought our team was pretty good. Like, we were pretty loaded. We went to Florida. I was probably like 13 years old. We went 0 for the tournament in Florida. We didn't win a game. We went there thinking we were hot stuff.
Right.
And we didn't win a single game out there. So it was, but hey, shout out to Sabian. You know, we'll wrap it up on the Giants, but you know, this Giants team feels like everyone's underperforming, Larry. Like, everybody.
They're
go down the list, and whatever I envisioned for what these guys would produce at the start of the year, it's like every single one of these guys is below that, whether it's Jung Hoo or Tyro Estrada or Matt Chapman. It's just like the whole list of guys, everyone's underperforming. So it's like, Giants.
Well, you know, here's the thing: the Giants signed Jung Hoo, and they gave him $19 million a year for 6 years. I think it was 6 years, 113, something like that. And all I said was, you know what? There's not a long lineage of KBO players coming to Major League Baseball that succeed. That most scouts will tell you that KBO is the equivalent of high A or double A. And that this is a major risk to give this kid $19 million. He starts the year. He's obviously a really good defensive center fielder. I mean, he plays center field with tremendous confidence. There's no question about that. That part of his game, totally real. He's got a nice swing, and he's got good bat speed. But here we are. It's, first week in May, and he's hitting right around 250. And 250 for $19 million. For a guy who's not going to hit 10 home runs and probably isn't going to steal 10 bases is a dramatic overpay. So, all these people, the guy hit a home run at Oracle Park and had a nice little hot April start for 2-3 weeks before the advanced scouts get around on him and make him adjust. And like, everybody's taking victory laps on me, like, Krug, you fucked up, you blew it. All I said was he's not worth $19 million. And here we are. It's now second week of May, and he's hitting 249 or 252, no power to speak of, not a lot of stolen base production. He's got like 2 steals. He's been caught like 5 times. He's on pace to hit 9 home runs, and they're paying him almost $20 million a year, and they guaranteed him a 6-year deal. So, just don't overreact to April. Let's just let the thing play out. Before you say, hey, Krug, you're a freaking idiot, you didn't like Jung Hoo. It's not that I didn't like Jung Hoo. I liked him for like 3 years and $30 million. I just didn't like him for 6 years at $19 million a year. So he doesn't look like he's worth it. Soler is a warm weather guy. So when the weather warms up, he'll get going. Right now, he looks bad. He looks cold. I never wanted to see the Giants go for Chapman because to me, they had Chapman. Chapman hasn't hit 250 in 5 years. And Casey Schmidt is an awesome defender. He's not Chapman, but he's an awesome defensive player. And I just really thought, why not just go with Casey Schmidt and let Casey Schmidt hit? If you're going to have a guy hit 220, 230, something like that, you might as well save your $100 million or $60 million and go with Casey Schmidt. Instead, they're going with Chapman, and he's just absolutely has holes in his swing, and he's going to hit sub 240. So that's a concern. Then Snell looks like just absolute S. Hicks has looked good, but I mean, you just look around this team, and it's like, you didn't want to go for a real first baseman because you love the Flores-Wade combo. All right. And then you got Tyro starting to heat up a little bit at second, but then you're sitting Luciano.
Why is he hitting 7? Why is Tyro Estrada hitting 7?
That guy should be hitting 2.
Yeah.
Yeah. But why is you got Nick Ahmed up here who can't hit at all? Why? Because you don't want to admit that Luciano's not ready. So now you're supposed to, in this rebuild year where you should have had Luciano and Schmidt on the left side of the diamond, you have Nick Ahmed and Matt Chapman, who are not getting better. They're getting worse. And then I don't get the Yaz thing. I mean, what the hell is he there? What's he doing? I really don't get the Slater thing. He's not getting good. So they're not getting anything out of the outfield at all. I mean, they're not getting anything out of the infield really either. Then you bring in Tom Murphy and you get rid of Joey Bart. Why? What's the advantage there?
Hitting bombs for the Pirates.
And he's doing it for nothing. He makes no money. And Tom Murphy's got a bum knee, and he's never a good defensive player. And it's just like, so, I mean, you chased out Joey Bart. You didn't go with Marco Luciano. You didn't go with Casey Schmidt. You're going with all these middling veterans. And it would be one thing if you contended, but you can't score. The Giants can't score at all. The Giants have not scored 4 runs in like 2 weeks. They are a horrendous offensive baseball team. Now, the pitching's pretty good. And Mason Black looked great today. Carson Wisenhunt is on the verge of amazing things. I don't know if you saw his last start. He had like 7 or 8 Ks, and 5 of them were on that Bugs Bunny changeup that he has. Harrison looks pretty good. They have good pitching. And once Robbie Ray and Alex Cobb joined the mix, and they could take Keaton Wynn and Hicks and put them in the bullpen, they could have a truly nasty bullpen with Doval and Hicks and Keaton Wynn and the Rogers brothers and Brandon Loop and then this kid Mason Black today looked really strong. So I mean, they've got pitching. They absolutely have enough pitching. But this offense is offensive. I mean, it's just so bad.
Yeah.
They can't score 5 runs. If the game's 2-1, 3-2, 4-3, they got a shot. If it gets into 5, the other team scores 5 or 6 or God forbid 7 or more, done. No chance.
Yeah.
No chance to win
sad.
those games.
Which is sad.
Yeah.
Hey, but Lair, we'll get out of here with this. As a Niner fan, I'm going to be tuned in because you're our eyes and our ears at this rookie mini camp. So I'll be locked into the content you're putting out to see which one of these rookies is balling out, who's showing up, who needs to step their game up. So Lair,
I'm going to try to get good camera shots of all these guys so you guys can get a look. And I'll watch what I can watch. And I'll say this: last year in minicamp, or 2 years ago in minicamp, Brock Purdy looked like something. He absolutely did.
And you let us know.
Yeah. So if somebody looks legit, I promise you I'll share it with you. All right, that does it for us. Thanks to Pig and a Pickle for being the title sponsor of the Krueger Show. Check them out. They're in Corte Madera and Emeryville. They're open 7 days a week from 11 a.m. to 8 p.m. Thanks to Underdog Fantasy. Check that link in the description. Use the promo code Krug, and they'll match you up to your first $100. That's KRUEG. Thanks to Marin Auto Glass, and thanks to Sharp Corners Sports Cards and Collectibles along the Monterey Peninsula. Great little collectible spot. They are at 205 Cypress Avenue, right there in Pacific Grove. Call Anthony Catania at 531-581-5864. And during the summer months, the first Friday of every month, they do kind of like a sidewalk deal where they have free food and drink down there, and people buy and sell collectibles. So give Anthony Catania a call. He's a great guy. He's a listener and viewer of the Krug Show. And he says his phone's ringing from people that are catching him on the Krug Show. So thanks to Sharp Corner Sports Cards and Collectibles for sponsoring this live stream. And thanks to you, Baller. Great stuff, man. Always good to see you. Always good to rap with you. I'm really, really interested to see, watching these NBA playoffs, how do the Warriors get off the deck and figure this out? Because I did a video the other day about their options, and I was going through Marcus Thompson from The Athletic wrote a piece on their options. Their options stink. You know what I mean? I don't want to trade Kuminga. I don't want to trade Trace Jackson Davis. I don't want to trade Pajemski. I don't want to give away everybody for LeBron in his 40s. I don't want to do round 2 of KD and Steph. I want to see the Warriors kind of build this thing up the right way instead of trying to, but I don't know what they're going to do. I don't know if they're going to get Zach LaVine or if they're going to be able to, get Lauri Markkanen or, somebody like, I don't know what they're going to do, but they're going to be up against it. I think if Joe Lacob really believes that he's light years ahead of the rest of the NBA, I would say now would be a good time to prove it.
Whatever it is, whatever they do, it might be without Klay Thompson. I don't know if you saw the report that came out today with Shams. There's
Orlando.
already mutual interest with Orlando and Klay
He needs
Thompson.
to move on. He needs to move on.
Well, that second half of the year he had it was pretty good, and I think it's going to kind of put him out of the Warriors' price range. Whereas I thought maybe before, could we get him back, at 15 mil maybe, but now no chance in hell. Even though he was 0 in the play-in game, he had as many points as me and you, Larry, in the play-in game. The biggest
I would say
the season,
most
Klay put up 0.
Yeah, he was terrible. I would say the most interesting 2 guys that they might be able to get, maybe Brandon Ingram out of New Orleans, maybe Zach LaVine out of Chicago. And I know there's a lot of people who don't like LaVine, but I don't see Golden State unless they have some they have no first round pick. They don't really have anybody to trade. The only guy they have in their prime is Wiggins. Nobody seems to want him. You know what I mean? It's like, if they can find a way to get in the championship discussion, that will be an amazing, amazing turn of events.
Hey, Mike Dunleavy, you let me down as a player, but hey, you can make up for it now as the GM. Let's go. Get this team back to contention. Oh, hey, make it happen, Mike.
There you go. Make it happen, Mike. Baller, have a great night, man. Appreciate you, brother.
Appreciate it. All right. Catch you later, Larry.
Peace, everybody. Have a great night. Thanks for tuning into the Krug Show.
Yeah, never met a man I've been scared of. Careful.